5. Them, 1954.
Mountain lions never come down into the desert.
No cat ever lived leave a print like that.
Maybe something was set down there.
Alright guys, a lot of you folks called for some classic black and white style monster movies, and yet I held off including the more iconic of them, given the fact that, yeah, no matter how much you'd like to argue against it, they're still pretty damn dated. However, one of those movies may well be impervious to the sands of time, and of course it would feature an equally impervious creature as its titular monstrosity. Them, a movie about giant radioactive ants, released way back when in 1954. And yet, despite its initial premise promising some unabashed cheese of the 50s variety, surprisingly this movie holds up phenomenally well. Particularly in its opening scene, which from a horror perspective was actually way ahead of its time. The sad truth is though, from our high and mighty tower of 2019, when we look back at black and white cinema, they have to work extra hard for them to stand the test of time. Granted, movies like Psycho, 1933's King Kong and the original Godzilla are iconic in their own right, but still, the truth remains the same. To be good, you gotta be the best. Directed by Gordon Douglas with a story from George Worthing Yates, Them tells a tale of two New Mexico police officers, Sergeant Ben Peterson, played by James Whitmore, who in his later life would go on to play Brooks from The Shawshank Redemption, alongside Trooper Ed Blackburn, as they discover a young girl distraught, wandering the desert in a strange, almost catatonic state. They take her to a nearby trailer set up by her family who were vacationing there, only to find that he's been mysteriously and savagely attacked by a strange, almost impossibly large creature. Well, what ensues is a classic cat and mouse pursuit of two intrigued police officers following in the wake of this destruction, and whilst anything else would be spoilers, when this movie gets going, it actually really gets going because, well, giant radioactive ants. That's why. That's all I'm saying. Despite that though, for a movie that during its time would have relied on being a quick cash grab, instead, Them actually takes its time in portraying an incredibly compelling narrative. For storyline and performance alone, this movie is worth a watch, and yes, whilst the effects may be dated, the bones of this movie are giant monster cinema 101. Swinging in at number 4, Prophecy, 1979. And if you thought Annihilation was cool for featuring some mutated ursine, think again, because 1979's Prophecy was doing it before it was even cool. And that's the point of this movie actually, because still 1979's Prophecy gets so trashed by critics that it's hard to see the mutated leaves for the trees. You see, as a creature feature, Prophecy is like playing a feral druid in an RPG. There's more metamorphoses than you can shake a branch at, but as a giant monster movie, this movie relies on a hodgepodge of all of those creatures into one giant pile of vile, mutagenic flesh. Sounds gross? Well yeah, that's because it is, and Prophecy loses quite a bit of its sheen down to the fact that the practical effects aren't exactly the greatest in this movie, especially when you understand the choices that this movie made in watering them down, but still, there's something quite charming about Prophecy that makes it worth its salt, and most importantly, like all worthy monster movies, this one has a message. Written by David Seltzer and directed by John Frankenheimer, the brilliant yet troubled director responsible for 1962's Birdman of Alcatraz, amongst many others, Prophecy was the first flagship title of the so-called Hollywood North, a business move in the late 70s intended to give a facelift for cinema in Canada. And what better way to do that than to create a story about a giant, vengeful forest spirit hell-bent on destroying a paper mill in the woodland of North America. I mean, yeah, it is set in Maine, but still, you get the picture. It tells the tale of Dr. Robert Verne, an environmental scientist who was commissioned to undertake a report about 3 lumberjacks that had mysteriously disappeared. Obviously, his pregnant wife accompanies him, because of course that's a sensible thing to do, and suddenly Dr. Verne witnesses something incredibly wrong with this forest. Giant salmon, vicious raccoons, tadpoles the size of bullfrogs, because why not? This movie essentially takes the ending scene of Jumanji and injects it with some highly mutagenic substances and then just lets everything go to hell. Don't piss off Mother Nature, guys. That's all I'm saying. No, but seriously, save the planet. Next up at number 3, Monsters, 2010. Okay, here we have a pretty difficult one. On the one tentacle, Monsters feature some of the most remarkable special effects that I've ever seen from a debut feature filmmaker. On the other tentacle, 2010's Monsters is difficult to access. This movie has a very peculiar pacing that makes it difficult to truly get behind, and on first viewing of this movie, I was left a little underwhelmed. However, when you watch this movie back, the craftsmanship behind it is astonishing. And for a film that promises on delivering a certain set of expectations, it certainly does that and then completely subverts them. Hey, maybe you'll be blown away by this movie like quite a number of people are and were, but all I'm saying is, if it doesn't stick, give it another chance. Also, the guy who made this movie, Gareth Edwards, well, I went to the same college as he did, and I grew up in the same town, so yeah. Please don't think I'm being biased. And also just saying, but Gareth Edwards is awesome, and both 2014's Godzilla and Star Wars Rogue One were remarkable efforts. Monsters tells a tale of a NASA deep space probe that, after crash landing in the wilderness of Mexico, sprouts extraterrestrial life forms that rapidly spread throughout the Mexico-US border region, subsequently leading to the quarantine of the northern half of Mexico. Quickly, both the US and Mexican troops frantically battled to contain these creatures, and so a huge wall stretches the entirety of the border and is quickly assembled. Sound familiar? Yeah, this movie is geopolitical and it pulls no punches in that regard. It's also prophetic, maybe, which is pretty weird to say, but whatever. It stars Scoot McNairy, who is awesome, by the way, as an American photojournalist tasked with finding his boss's daughter, played by Whitney Able, who is stranded in a Mexican hospital in the heartlands of the Ravaged Zone. And that's all I'll say, really, because this movie is a road movie without any roads, just giant tentacular creatures roaming the wasteland. Also, it's important to note that this movie isn't exactly scary, but instead it offers a far more refreshing angle to the giant monster genre, and that alone is worth taking a look at. Coming in at number 2, The Relic, 1997. Pretty unfortunate timing that, isn't it? This movie, like many others, makes SWAT teams look incredibly inefficient. Sorry SWAT, but it's a pretty glaring trope that I just had to point out. If you see a SWAT team, you know things are gonna get, well, pretty bad. Now, if you guys didn't know, I absolutely love this weird little 90s oddball of a movie, and so it only feels appropriate that somewhere down the line we just have to give it a place on our giant monster movies list. Kothoga certainly stands the test of time in that regard, and although flawed in many ways, the amount of unabashed 90s brilliance that is poured into this movie is truly a feat to be witnessed. This movie is just fun, and if we're in the mood for being comparative, 1997's The Relic is the deep impact of the movie monster world, and whilst we all know that Deep Impact is far superior to Armageddon, in that regard, The Relic is kind of unrivaled too. And not only is it unrivaled, it's just fun. This movie is so damn entertaining that you should give it a watch just for that sake. Directed by Peter Hymans and based upon the 1995 novel of the same name by Douglas Preston and Lincoln Child, The Relic tells a tale of Dr. Margot Green, played by the awesome Penelope Ann Miller, an evolutionary biologist who is stationed at the Field Museum of Natural History in downtown Chicago. Here, during her application for a brand new research grant, she stumbles upon the unearthed research of a missing anthropologist, Dr. John Whitney, who has seemingly disappeared after studying the cultural practices of a tribe in the jungles of South America. Now, part of this research is a strange stone statue that depicts a creature known only as the Kothoga, a mythical monster that rules the forgotten jungles of South America. And then, of course, suddenly and out of nowhere, people just start losing their heads and their brains willy-nilly in all manners of crazy, mysterious, museum-based monstrosities. If you enjoy ominous camera work around dark corridors, and if you enjoy the premise of loosely based anthropology in one of the most underrated and entertaining movies of the 90s with some remarkable performances to boot, giant monster included, then this movie is certainly for you. And finally, coming in at number 1 spot, The Ritual, 2017. Alright then guys, let's pull no punches. If it's scary that you came for, then scary is what you're going to get. Truth be told, as has been highlighted in both parts of this series, when it comes to actual giant monsters in horror cinema, it's relatively difficult to efficiently deliver the spooks. It's like a sliding scale, really, and the larger these creatures become, then the more that the technicalities of horror cinema become diminished. It's difficult to balance, and perhaps the reason that many of these monster movies have instead relied on the tried and tested trope of creating the most convincingly large creature imaginable, 2017's The Ritual, however, is perhaps the finest balance of the two, and although we have already covered it in a creature feature regard, it is only proper that we give it its place here too. Mainly for the fact that, well, the Jotun is pretty damn large, and terrifying, and weird. But yeah, that's just what we've come to expect when it comes to the mythological monstrosities of the ancient Norse. That goes without saying. Directed by David Bruckner with a screenplay by Joe Barton, 2017's The Ritual is based upon the 2011 novel of the same name by Adam Neville, which is surprisingly brilliant. The film itself stars Rafe Spall, Arsha Ali, Robert James Collier, and Sam Troughton, who all offer some freaking fantastic performances in this movie, and play Luke, Phil, Hutch, and Dom respectively, 4 best friends who agree to hike the Kungsleden Forest in Sarek National Park, northern Sweden, following the tragic death of their longtime friend, Rob, who wished to hike the trail before he was murdered in an effort to bring their struggling friendship back together. Spoilers, kind of. And really, that's kind of all there is to The Ritual, without giving any other spoilers away, because it's 4 best friends trapped in a terrifying forest as a giant monster and its fanatical death cult roam the woodland ready to ruin everyone's day. And yet, although the brilliance of this movie relies on some well-constructed interlocking narratives, ultimately resulting in a more than cathartic ending, the best part of 2017's The Ritual is the creature design alone. Seriously, the less we say about the Jotun, the better, but this film features one of the most unique monster designs of recent times, and whilst not as big as Godzilla or King Kong, as so far as originality in horror cinema goes, this giant, terrifying demigod is certainly worth the zealotry. Give it a watch.
Number 5. SCP-2107. A soda to diet for. Imagine, if you will, you are walking through the city on a hot day. Perhaps you've been for a jog, or were simply running errands. Either way, you are parched, thirsty, or otherwise dehydrated. You decide to stop in at your local convenience store to grab something to drink. You peruse the refrigerated shelves, passing by the usual suspects. Cans of Coke, Pepsi, and Dr. Pepper. When suddenly, something catches your eye that you've never seen before. A simple silver can with a light blue label called Diet Ghost. Under the name is a small subtitle which promises that this beverage will scare your thirst away. You've never seen this drink advertised, but you think perhaps it is just a new drink on the market. Or perhaps it is a drink normally sold in foreign markets that the store owner has chosen to import. Either way, your curiosity cries out to be satisfied, and you take the silver can to the counter, pay for it, crack it open, and take a swig. At first, nothing seems out of the ordinary. The drink is quenching and refreshing, but before long, something starts to feel off. Things in your home begin to move by themselves. Strange whispers are heard when your home is otherwise empty. Strange phantom figures appear and disappear without warning. Depending on how much of the mystery soda you ingested, the paranormal activity may be more and more intense, and can result in you being harmed or even killed. This is the nature of SCP-2107. The Foundation report claims that anyone who ingests such a drink is to be treated with Class A anesthetics and remitted to the nearest hospital until the mystery drink passes through the victim's system. When the Foundation goes to the store where the soda was purchased, the employees usually claim that they had no knowledge of such a drink, and their inventory records show no record of such a drink being ordered or delivered. This implies that some malevolent force is stocking the shelves of stores and bodegas with a harmful beverage that causes innocent shoppers to experience terrifying encounters with the paranormal. Number 4. SCP-1171. The Prejudiced Window Dweller. The next story begins in Queensland, Australia, where a homeowner moves into a house that was built in 1958. At first, it seems like a normal home, until strange occurrences begin occurring, leading the homeowner to believe that the house is being haunted. The home is investigated by civil authorities, which eventually leads to the home being investigated by the Foundation's agents. What they find is so incredible that they feel the need to purchase the home through a front organization and alter the memories of the previous homeowner. They put a doctor in the home, posing as the new owner, to study it and erect a tall wall around the backyard. All the windows are fitted with shutters, and several agents are moved in for security under the guise of being lodgers. All year, despite changing humidity and weather, the windows are covered by a layer of condensation that cannot be explained. Words suddenly begin appearing, written in the condensation, as if an appendage has been dragged through the moisture. The doctor discovers that by writing messages in the condensation with his finger, he can achieve two-way communication. He learns that the entity is from another dimension and is not human, and worst of all, despises humans. The doctor lies about being a human in order to learn as much as possible. Here is the record of their conversations. "Carbon-based monkeys, go home!" Hello? There is a pause. "Someone there?" The doctor introduces himself. "Nice to meet you. I'm Boramont." "Where are you?" "In my living room. Where are you?" "In another living room." "This is neat. How are you doing this?" "Is there no one else there?" Mostly just a bunch of gametes and carbon lovers. Can't hardly stand any of that politically correct crap." "Say, what do you look like?" "Oh, pretty average. 7 tendrils tall, brown carapace, green bioluminescence, blue eyes. You?" "Same." The SCP doesn't ever seem to catch on to the fact that he has befriended a human, and goes on several tangents against the species, calling them air-sucking sacks of protoplasm, and implying that violence might end up being the solution to dealing with them. What is the social order in this SCP's dimension? And how will he react when he realizes a human has been lying to him? Number 3, SCP-1450, the Paint Bug. Imagine the following terrifying situation. You have moved into an old home, or perhaps you are visiting an abandoned warehouse as an urban explorer. Either way, the surroundings are old, and you are a curious type. At first, the building seems normal, but eventually, you make your way to one of the rooms. The wall is painted a light shade of blue, but you are more interested in the contents of the room than the color of the walls. After a moment, you look at the navy wall with confusion. You're almost sure that it was a different color when you came in. You go up to one of the walls to take a better look, when the color suddenly changes again. But this time, you try to move, but realize that the bright shifting colors have mesmerized you, and try as you might, you cannot bring yourself to move. It is at this moment that you realize that a massive colony of insects has covered your body while you have been standing there frozen. As if that wasn't bad enough, they are extremely hungry. They begin to bite, tearing small chunks of your flesh away at an alarming rate. Though you can feel every bite, you still cannot move, as the bugs consume every ounce of you, leaving nothing behind except your bones. This is the hunting pattern of SCP-1450, who have chromatic plating, which allows them to affect a form of metacrosis in order to mimic the dried paint of the walls, before their prey becomes aware of them, at which point they will begin moving together to form the mesmerizing and hypnotic pattern. The Foundation works to contain these creatures and ran the following test to learn more about them. A D-Class test subject was sent into the SCP's holding cell, with instructions to wait for 20 minutes. Minutes 1 to 5. D-Class subject does nothing. SCP-1450 displays no reaction. Minutes 5 to 7. D-Class subject paces about the room. SCP-1450 slowly begins to shift in hue. Minute 7. D-Class subject goes to examine nearest portion of SCP-1450. From here, all notations made are based off of studied recordings, as the observation group recalls nothing after minute 7. Analysis shows observation group was affected in the same manner as D-Class test subject. Minutes 8 to 13. D-Class subject examines SCP-1450. It responds by shifting its chroma to stun D-Class subject. The examined portion of SCP-1450 holds the color pattern, while the rest of the colony disengages from its nest to begin climbing D-Class subject. Subject appears unaware of the presence of the SCP on his body. Minutes 13 to 20. D-Class subject becomes aware of SCP-1450 and begins striking at the nearest members with his hands. SCP-1450 immediately responds by biting into his legs. Subject is immobilized by pain and collapses. SCP-1450 finishes swarming over his form and proceeds to consume all material present, excluding the subject's bones. SCP-1450 returns to original position and hue. Number 2. SCP-6373, The Puppet Show from Hell. The Goffard Theater in Reading, Pennsylvania was opened in 1860 by Timothy Goggard and would host stage plays, musical performances, and most importantly, puppet shows. The puppets were designed by Goffard himself, with the most notable and consistently featured puppets being an elderly male in black with a beret named Pierre, a big disembodied head with big ears who can only speak in groans named Glouton, a smaller disembodied woman's head named Âme, who is frequently the target of Pierre's violent outbursts, and a long-necked clown named Jacques. Goffard came upon hard times after his divorce and lost the theater before dying soon after. In the years since, the puppets would come to life in the theater at 6 p.m. every night, and would begin to move on their own and perform bizarre and disturbing shows for anyone in attendance. The Foundation began to study the performances, which got darker and more violent and disturbing as time went on. Here is the report from one such performance. Pierre performs a piano duet with Jacques, who is unable to be quiet or still. Though Jacques apologizes, Pierre repeatedly slams the puppet's head into the piano, denting it. When Pierre is finished, viewers note Jacques' jaw has detached completely. Jacques' laughter turns into pained cries as the puppet takes damage. Within minutes, viscous yellow fluid begins to seep from Jacques as it fails to reattach its jaw. Audience describes the liquid's odor as repugnant. Pierre retrieves Âme and forces the puppet to sit in the puddle of the fluid. This event marks the beginning of a trend towards increasingly violent behavior. While puppets sustain heavy damage as a result, they begin each performance fully restored. Notably, Jacques' jaw is never fixed, and the fluid continues to seep from the puppet. Eventually, the puppets seem to have more and more trouble moving and speaking, before one night for their performance, they stood stationary for 18 minutes, before simply bowing and collapsing to the ground, never to move or perform again. Upon inspection, each puppet had human organs within it, with Pierre containing a brain, Jacques a heart, Glouton an indecipherable mass of organs, and Âme being strangely empty. Number 1. SCP-3219, Lost in the Woods. This SCP is a 7 square kilometer region of space in South Mountain National Park. It exhibits a strange aura that makes animals avoid it, and people who enter it often report dizzy spells, hearing strange and unexplained sounds, as well as losing time, or sometimes disappearing completely, without ever being seen again. The Foundation has set up a 90-kilometer exclusion zone in order to attempt to stem these disappearances, but more and more people keep going missing after inadvertently wandering into this area of the woods. An example of the strange occurrences can be found in the Foundation's incident report, number 3210-0219. It reads as follows. 4 members of the Bonafide family were reported missing after failing to return home from a camping trip planned within South Mountain State Park. Park rangers cooperated with local police to organize a search party. On the first day, hunting dogs led the search party to the edge of SCP-3219. The dogs refused to enter. Furthermore, the search party described several incidents of dizziness, lost time, and erratic behavior among nearby wildlife. On the third day, 2 members of the search party disappeared. Shortly after this incident, the Sutherland Sheriff's Office ordered all workers to continue the search for the Bonafide family in a region adjacent to SCP-3219. After a 3-month-long investigation, no traces of the Bonafide family or the 2 missing rescue workers were found.
Kicking off the list at number 5, we have SCP-106. And it appears to be an elderly humanoid with a general appearance that looks like they're decomposing, kind of like they're dying. Nice creepy look, you know? This appearance may change from time to time, but the rotting look applies always. That's like a guaranteed thing. SCP-106 is, of course, not very agile and will remain motionless for days at a time, waiting for, of course, its prey. SCP-106 is also capable of scaling any vertical surface and can remain suspended upside down indefinitely, like Batman, only horrible and frightening. When attacking, SCP-106 will attempt to incapacitate prey by damaging major organs like muscle groups, tendons, and if that doesn't sound bad enough, SCP-106 will then pull you, after all of that, it's going to pull you into its pocket dimension, which is just a lovely way to go after getting your neck bitten. SCP-106 prefers human prey who are in the age range from 10 to 25 years old. I'm 26 now, so I think we're good. I think we're golden. SCP-106 causes a corrosion effect in anything that it touches, engaging a physical breakdown in materials just seconds after contact. So it begins rusting, rotting, or cracking anything really, and while it's doing that, it creates this black mucus-like substance that like leaks all over it. It's very similar to the material that covers it and leaks around it. They don't know what it is, but it's just gooey, it's gross. And it's assumed to be this pre-digestion action almost. You know, gotta heat your food up before you eat it, you gotta cover yourself up in slime before you bite people's arms. I get it. Corrosion continues for 6 hours after contact. After that, it seems to burn out. That's a long time for your skin to melt off. Like I feel like if I stand in the sun for 45 minutes, I'm tapped out. I'm way too pale to enjoy sunlight, no way. SCP-106 is capable of passing through solid matter, leaving behind that corrosive mucus, of course. Which way did he go? That way, for sure, definitely that way. Let's go this way. SCP-106 is able to vanish inside solid matter, entering what is assumed to be a form of that pocket dimension that I was telling you about earlier. So SCP-106 is then able to exit this dimension from any point connected to the initial entry point. So if it enters a wall over here, it can come out of the ceiling over there. No physical interaction with SCP-106, period. That's the rule. It's to be concealed in a container made of lead-lined steel. The container will then be sealed within 40 layers of an identical material, each layer separated no less by 36 centimeters of empty space. That's a lot of layers and a lot of space. That's good. Keep it that way. Let's add some more if we need to. Support struts between layers are to be randomly spaced, and on top of that, there's 24-hour surveillance. And before we continue, guys, if you haven't already, please go ahead and toss us a thumbs up on our video because it helps us out quite a bit here at our hidden facility. Thank you so much. Okay, now back to the list. And number 4, we have SCP-966. SCP-966 are predatory creatures that, of course, resembles human beings, but are hairless and have an elongated face with a mouth full of these needle-like teeth. So that's just lovely. And on each of their hands, they have 5 sharp claws that can grow up to 20 centimeters long, like Freddy Krueger style, you know? SCP-966 height is around 1.5 meters, and they can weigh up to 30 kilograms. They don't rest by hitting the hay and sleeping 8 hours, no. Instead, they will suddenly cease all movement at these random intervals throughout the day, and then resuming normal activity 3 to 5 minutes later. So basically what I do every time I clean my room, I just stop and do nothing for minutes at a time. SCP-966 feeds on medium to large size animals and of course also humans. Sorry. They either hunt by themselves or in pairs, and their hunting methods consist of emitting single bursts of this wave. And this wave permanently inhibits the ability of the affected creature to enter any of the REM sleep stages. So the ability to microsleep is also lost, so no more nap time. Sorry guys. Sorry anybody named Becky. I don't know who naps. What's a napping name? I don't know. The effective range of the waves is up to 20 meters. However, tests show that they can be blocked by certain materials, most commonly that being lead. All attempts to make victims of SCP-966 sleep have failed, so counting sheep is not an option. After depriving their victims of sleep, SCP-966 will stalk them until a lack of rest kills them, basically. Now at this point, SCP-966 will proceed to consume it. SCP-966 are very agile and silent when they're stalking their victims, and they'll actually deliberately make threatening noises around the prey in order to stress it out more, and may even physically assault it if the victim proves to be durable enough. So, good luck. And coming in at number 3, SCP-017 is also, of course, a creepy human-like figure. This time it's approximately 80 centimeters in height, similar to a small child, which is so comforting. But with no identifying features, right? So it looks like this small little ball of shadow, almost. And if anybody watching has floaters in your eyes like I do, it's kind of like a large floater. It's just there. No attempt to find out what's beneath this shroud has been successful, but the possibility has not been ruled out, okay? So its containment is a glass cage, 100 centimeters by 50 centimeters by 50 centimeters, suspended in a concrete room, measuring by 6 meters by 6 meters by 4 meters. And attached to the walls of the room and the ceiling and even the floor are these high intensity spotlights pointed directly at this cage, so that it's constantly exposed to light from literally every angle. Personnel assigned to SCP-017's control room are to monitor the spotlights at the emergency generator system and call for maintenance immediately if any of the light bulbs go out or if there's any issue with the generator. The only circumstance in which anybody can enter the containment area is to replace the light bulbs. How many people does it take to replace the light bulb? Not me. I'm not going in there. No chance. You can do it. Personnel entering the room are required to wear body reflective suits, nice, and cannot step in front of the lights, or else you would become a human disco ball. But more importantly, you would, of course, cut light off from SCP-017. So what happens now? Well, SCP-017's reaction to shadows cast upon it is very fast and very frightening. If there's any shadow cast upon it, SCP-017 leaps at whatever's casting the shadow and completely encloses it in its shroud, where it returns to its normal size, leaving no trace of you behind. It's kind of like Pac-Man, just gobbles you up and then you're gone. You don't exist anymore. So when it comes to this Keter class SCP, you for sure want to sleep with the lights on. Absolutely. And number 2. This one's a little different because it's not like a physical thing and it's not a creepy humanoid for a change, which is nice. But if you're affected, there's no way of permanently escaping it, and it is just a nightmare, okay? So SCP-2571 is a childhood memory of a theme park that doesn't exist. So if the name Cragglewood Park means anything to you, sorry in advance, you might want to close this video right now. The odds are low, but still very real. So around 0.5% of the world's population is affected by SCP-2571. However, recent evidence suggests that this number may be growing. The reason for the spreading of all these false memories is still unknown, but it's most commonly among adults who are raised as an only child. I feel like a good portion of viewers just sat up as soon as I said that. I'm not even an only child, and this SCP still sends chills down my spine. Afflicted subjects are initially responsive to anesthetics, but memories regarding Cragglewood Park will usually come back after their treatment ends, so it's not going anywhere. Although descriptions of these memories change from time to time, there are still several details that will remain consistent, and those details go as the following. Subjects were between the age of 4 and 12 when they visited, okay? That's a big window, so, The park featured numerous characters, primarily centered around trees and plants. There's no adult supervision, which is exactly what you want in a theme park, and Calliope music played throughout the entire place. You know, that classic carnival music? Sounds like any park in Roller Coaster Tycoon. Subjects attended the park with numerous other children, but none of which who they knew. The park featured only one ride, and that was a carousel, or a merry-go-round, if you say merry-go-round still. So not only is this a pretty boring park filled with kids, but I mean the one ride is a carousel. I mean, throw a drop tower or two in there, keep it fresh. Then maybe it'll be more memorable. I don't know. This is actually terrifying. Does any of this sound familiar to you? Like, I've heard of certain TV shows that kids can remember, but they never existed. So if anything like this has happened in general, comment below, because those stories always creep me the hell out. I love reading them while I eat cereal. I read creepy stories. And finally, number 1, we have SCP-2935. The entrance has been sealed off with concrete and access is forbidden, and that's for good reason. Okay, so SCP-2935 is a space-time anomaly in a cave beneath a cemetery in Indiana. Nothing good is ever near cemeteries. Can we all just stay away from them? They've had their life, they're dead, let them be dead. The cemetery was discovered by Foundation personnel after radio signals were discovered from within the cave. So the SCP-2935 anomaly is a nearly exact replica of modern Earth, but in the year 2016, with the only difference being that all life, as well as any sentient life like machines, computers, all that jazz, all life within SCP-2935 ended on April 20th, 2016. So on 4/20 of all days too, there you go. Information gathered by the Mobile Task Force who initially entered SCP-2935 all confirms that the life forms suddenly and without warning just disappeared. Kind of like Thanos, but worse. This is one of those caves you should never enter. I mean, going back to 2016 sounds great and all, especially right now, but a world without Mario Kart or Siri? What about Siri? She's so helpful. God, no chance. That would be so boring. We'd get lost all the time. No life, no fun. That's the way I say it. So on April 28th, 2016, a radio signal was detected near Bloomington, Indiana. This signal was traced to Joppa, Indiana, near US Interstate 70. So Site 81 personnel in Indianapolis were sent out to determine the source of the signal as per Foundation policy, and discovered SCP-2935 during their examination of the area. And the first time they discovered it, they didn't even know that they had discovered it. How nuts is that? They just sent a drone in and thought that it had left the other side of the cave. That's how fast it happens, folks. Keep your eyes open. Don't go in any caves, especially if you hear carnival music. Just get out of there. Kicking off the list at number 5, SCP-895, also known as camera disruption, for good reason that is. SCP-895 is an oak coffin found in an unspecified location. Of course, secret coffins for the win, ayo. Its powers are quite crazy. See, I know the title says monsters, but this is a monster. I'm gonna count these things as monsters. Like, I don't know what else to refer to them by. Like, that's the best name for them. They f your day up, okay? We'll put it like that. And if you go near it with photographic equipment, like say your phone for starters, SCP-895 will cause disruptions in your camera equipment with disturbing hallucinations. That's terrible. Imagine walking towards it like, oh, it's a neat coffin, better snag a pic. Within a range of 5 meters from SCP-895, the footage that you film can cause severe psychological trauma and hysteria. That's not a bad video to have on your phone at all times. Like, if people are being rude, you can just send that video to them, you know? Or if someone's talking on their phone on the bus, always the worst, you can just boop, airdrop the video to them and they're like, hang on 1 second. Huh. Problem solved, you're a hero. The bus driver is just gonna take you anywhere you wanna go for the rest of the day while people cheer your name. That's it. And number 4, SCP-012. This one's a fun one, also referred to as a bad composition. This Euclid class SCP looks like it's part of like a sheet music set. So the top of the page of the music, it reads, "On Mount Golgotha," which I guess was a banger back in ye olde day. That dude probably sat by a hot candle for hours just humming and like dipping, like, check it out on Spotify, let's do it. The music, however, is actually not complete. And this is where things start to take a bit of a dark turn. See the dark red ink that's often viewed as buried dye? Yep, turns out it's actually blood, as you probably guessed. Blood from previous subjects. The song isn't even a banger after all. What? It's a cacophony, lacking correlation and harmony between instruments. So don't expect to be making any sick TikTok dances with "On Mount Golgotha." So it's at least hidden in a containment chamber, thank the Lord. So if you get the misfortune of coming close to SCP-012, you will hear the not so sweet music of "On Mount Golgotha." And then you will start to cut yourself and use your own blood as ink to try and complete the score of music. But that's the beauty of SCP-012. You can't complete it. It's kind of like the game Skyrim. You'll never do it all, man. Just give it up. And coming in at number 3, SCP-372. This one is a personal favorite of the SCP family. See, SCP-372 is also known as the Peripheral Jumper, and it's a creature of unknown origins, of course, but it's about 2 meters long from head to toe, well, tail rather, and it weighs in at about 100 pounds. It has a long, thin body with 8 pairs of narrow limbs. Every part of the body is abnormally flexible, and the limbs are coated with small fibers that cling to almost any solid surface. So it's like a little thin Spider-Man type thing. So basically, this thing is like a thin boy. It's very thin, almost noodle-like, some would say, with their noodly limbs and noodle neck, I don't know. Instead of having ears or eyes, it has a yellow sensory organ which gives it the ability of echolocation. So it's like a bat noodle, you know? And can also detect energy transfers, like the electrical impulses in our brains. So if you think you can just sneak up on old Noodle Rick, you're wrong, Buster. SCP-372 has learned to time its movements to the pulses in your brains and can predict the movements of any being around it. So it uses this technique to hide, either by hiding behind the person's head, who's looking for it at all times, or by hiding in their peripheral vision, or you can see it for a very brief second if you blink really fast. So this is the scariest SCP hands down. I would lose my goddamn mind just sitting at home looking for it like, I have floaters. That's basically what I experience every day already. Floaters suck. If you have floaters, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So, how do you know if you're getting close to SCP-372? Well, upon entering its containment chamber, you hear a little rustling sound, a little. Now, okay, this means it's starting to stalk you. So, if you hear the ruffles of doom, GTFO. And number 2, SCP-939. Yo, dude, I think your mom's calling you upstairs. Oh, that's weird. She went to get groceries like half an hour ago. Better check it out. SCP-939 is a terrifying one, also referred to as with many voices. SCP-939 will use its previous victim's voice to lure you in. How awesome and terrifying is that? I'll tell you why this Keter class SCP kicks ass. I've only told you what it does, and you're probably already afraid of it. Wait until you see what this thing looks like. Bam! It's like a 2 meter tall, black, red, scaly, dragon type creature. It kind of looks like an alligator in a way. And one bite to the neck or the head, and you are toast, my friend. I feel like I would absolutely fall for this thing's trap. So once it attracts you, as soon as it sees you, it's chasing you down to kill you. Like, it's fast. It's got 4 legs, like I said, but each leg has like 4 claws. It has 3 on the top, and then one has like a little thumb. So, you know this 550-pound thing is going to grab you by the neck or something with that claw thumb. I don't like things with thumbs, like raccoons. They can just grab garbage. I don't like how they can open things with their hands. No thank you. The jaws of this monster have a bloody red color and razor sharp teeth, of course. And they're long teeth too. They're not like little baby guys. No, they're like 6 centimeters long. Imagine that in your neck. Ugh. Their spines have like these 16 centimeter long spikes that are believed to be sensitive to changes in air pressure and flow. So how lovely is that? There's also no chance you can outsmart this thing either. At least I wouldn't try, I don't know. Like if I heard my name, I'm invested in finding out who said it. I'm not like one of those teens in Friday the 13th who like play it cool and slow, like, oh, someone there? Oh, I just thought I heard something, that's weird. No, the second I hear my name, I'm like, yeah, coming, let's go. And finally, coming in at number 1, SCP-970. Commonly referred to as the recursive room, this SCP-970 is a spatial phenomenon where a collection of rooms are looped on themselves. Yeah, it puts the curse in recursive. Haha. In any case, it doesn't matter which door you go through in this hallway. Even if you walk in a straight line, you'll just end up right back at your starting position. It's a nightmare. So the alteration to the rooms don't affect neighboring rooms and floors. So it's kind of like in Super Mario 64 when you're going up those stairs forever because you don't have enough stars to get to the top. Like I would lose my mind in this thing. SCP-970 affects a hallway and storage room in the light containment zone. Okay, so inside the storage room is this level 1 keycard, a battery, a document, and then an empty cup. Sounds like the cool like escape room type props. I don't know, it's weird, very specific. So as the player walks through the looping doors, certain things will begin to change on you. Depending what you're carrying, certain things will just randomly disappear. So you may get injured, of course. I mean, this is a room of nightmares. I would for sure hit my head off something pretty hard. Like, I don't want to be awake for this nightmare. This next thing is just so wild. So if you keep doing these laps over and over, a dead scientist will appear in the room just rotating in midair. So, like, how do you keep going after that point? Like, I'd be like, okay, well, this is it. This is hell. I've made it now to hell. No way. Oh, also a random item can appear like on you, like on your persons. And a guard can be found standing in the hallway. He doesn't say anything, he just stares at you the whole time. He'll vanish eventually if you keep walking, but you gotta deal with that first. I mean, that's good luck. If the subject is carrying any documents, one of them will be replaced by another random document. Like, imagine checking your work schedule and then all of a sudden you look and it's just something else. It's actually on Mount Golgotha. You're like, ah.
Coming in number 5, we've got SCP-5142. At first, you might laugh at the idea of this SCP. It's pretty goofy and contains references to a song we all know and love. Just about every person who hears it will find themselves singing along at some point, whether it pops up in a meme or if they see a can of assorted diced fruit at the supermarket. A whole lot of fun for the whole family. Well, that is until you realize the scope of the anomaly we're talking about today. We're all familiar with the song Fruit Salad by the Wiggles, right? Perfect. Well, if you've heard this song before, you've been under its mimetic effects. It's just so catchy, right? Like, almost too catchy? It almost makes you crave some fruit salad after listening. Well, if you've ever found yourself with a hankering for some mixed fruits after listening, you're not alone. Apparently the bit where the Wiggles sing fruit salad has mimetic properties and makes people crave fruit salad. At first, it's just a little craving, but with time, they will refuse to eat anything other than the medley. If they hear other nouns within a short period of time after listening to that phrase, these items will also be added to the list of desirable foods. It doesn't matter if these are edible or even remotely safe to consume, folks will try to eat them. The longer this goes on, the more intense the cravings become, to the point where the subjects will engage in dangerous and possibly self-harming behavior to acquire said items. Close to a month from the onset of this anomaly, the affected individuals will also start to turn a bluish color and gain incredible amounts of muscle. It's a wild thing to behold, to say the least. Now, this has some very upsetting consequences in the past, like parents potentially consuming their young children alongside a side of honey, or maybe actually eating cars and houses. Not great. However, this is easily remedied. I said that the phrase sung by the Wiggles, fruit salad, is a meme. Thankfully, the refrain, yummy yummy, is the anti-meme. So as long as you listen to a yummy yummy after a initial fruit salad, you'll be free from these effects. So just make sure you listen to it all the way through. Don't, you could become a rampaging ogre of a human, demanding to consume fruit salad, street signs, maybe even the president. Coming in number 4, we've got SCP-5172. This one messes with my brain a little bit. I'm not even sure what I'm supposed to think anymore. All of my hotel experiences are now suspect. Did I encounter something like this? Oh boy. SCP-5172 is a strange phenomenon seemingly affecting guests at North American hotels. It gives them the impression that there is a machine there built for the sole purpose of making and dispensing ice. I always took it for granted that hotels had such devices, but according to this document, those aren't standard practice. There's a whole history to this, but we'll gloss over it in favor of the spooky story within. Check out the wiki entry if you want more anomalous ice machine history lessons. Now, anyone who uses one of these so-called ice machines at a hotel will activate what's known as a Zalmunna event. These events are very likely to cause injury or death. In fact, the Foundation discovered SCP-5172 when investigating a string of grisly murders in Winnipeg. Go Canada. So after hallucinating the use of an ice machine, the affected individual will start to feel as if they're being watched. This will develop into confusion and then exhaustion. The fatigue is so intense that they feel as if they can't do anything other than seek out their hotel bed and go to sleep. At this point, if they sleep anywhere other than a hotel bed, the event is cut short. Their lives will be spared. But if they make it to their cozy comfort-in mattress, game over. This is when SCP-5172-1 appears, usually by phasing through the door. 5172-1 is a humanoid entity with extra long arms and a long, needle-like thing extending from its head. It will sit on the victim's chest, inducing a sleep paralysis-like state where they're aware of what's happening, but unable to move or speak. It'll then stab them through the eye with the needle-like extension and begin to harvest material from the person's chest. Using tools from its chest cavity, 5172-1 will begin cutting and scooping 4-centimeter cubes from its victim with relative ease. Starting slowly and picking up speed over time, it usually spends a couple hours hollowing out its victim before getting up and exiting the way it came in. Holy smokes. These creatures have so far only been seen in North American hotels and can actually be stopped through force, but killing one doesn't prevent it from happening again in the future. So let's hope ice machines don't show up anywhere else. Oh, they have. There's one in Amsterdam now. Uh-oh. Coming in number 3, we've got SCP-2728. Anyone living out that terrifying 90s nightmare of a stable job day in, day out? It's weird to think that the cultural zeitgeist at the turn of the century centered on complaining about how stable and boring everything was. Look at us now! SCP-2728 is a strange manifestation of that kind of terror. Here, it's probably easier if I just explain how it works. There's a point in Barcelona where you can see a building that isn't actually there. Like, you stand on the street corner and look up, and then you can view an office building poking up from the skyline that can't be seen from any other angle. The Foundation studied it for a while and saw that it had regular business hours, shut down on Sundays, and was full of people that had real-world counterparts. Interesting. Don't get too close though. It seems that anyone who notices this building and gets up nice and close is brought into their bustling business, made to work their regular hours doing nothing for all eternity. The Foundation sent an agent to check it out, but they discovered that he had been replaced by a near-perfect body double. However, the original agent did his best to reach out via Morse code to let the Foundation know that his life had become hell. Apparently, the folks there function like insects, doing only their job and never anything else. And the city no longer has any outer limits. And from the building, the sky is endless and dark. Coming in number 2, we've got SCP-3966. This is an SCP with a much harder approach to sci-fi than many, with a lot of it being tied up in mathematics and physics. With that in mind, I will probably miss some of the best bits because of the way my brain works, but if you're a fan of hard sci-fi, this is definitely up your alley. 3966 is a neuroactive polypeptide found in human spinal fluid. Apparently it's been sequenced and nothing in it is even close to being human. No one really knows where it came from or what it's doing, but folks affected by it experience higher rates of hypnic jerk. You know that feeling when you're about to fall asleep and then you think you're falling? Well, over time, the researchers concerned with this anomaly became infected themselves and started to feel the effects. They then discover that there are 2 variants of the stuff. Soon enough, it becomes clear that it is a cognitohazard and can spread through just the knowledge of it. And eventually, we learn that it could essentially be something from the 4th dimension, something that we can't fully conceptualize reaching out to us in some way. Just like how folks in a hypothetical flatland couldn't see us if we looked down on them from up above, whatever's behind 3966 has a whole new dimension to exist in, making it impossible for us to see all of it. But if it contacts us in our 3D land directly, we might experience just a bit of it. Coming in number 1, we've got SCP-5346. Careful though, this one might ruin one of your favorite movies. 5346 is a cognitohazardous phenomenon that manifests upon the viewing of a specific scene in Forrest Gump. The classic line about boxes of chocolates triggers some sort of conspiracy theory craziness deep in people's brains. Was the line "life is like a box of chocolates" or "life was like a box of chocolates"? You probably know the answer, but the people affected by this phenomenon, it'll drive them nuts. Some Mandela effect nonsense at its finest. Over time, the people watching this movie will start to feel as if the characters on screen are aware of their presence and are watching them. Glances at the camera, uncomfortable line deliveries, it's a whole rabbit hole to fall down. Apparently those who do fall too deep begin to actually experience some terrifying facsimile of Hanks's Gump in their real life. They will see him around their home, looking in through windows, strolling down hallways, and eventually, it'll get them. Users who posted about this on their favorite conspiracy chat rooms and image boards often end up dead, victims of blunt trauma to the head. And in one case, a note was recovered in their apartment that reads, "Mama always said stand up to snitches." So if you revisit Forrest Gump, maybe don't analyze it too deeply. Coming in at number 5, we've got SCP-681. Gas leaks are no joke, but at least they aren't sentient. Could you imagine gas coming to find you even when you make it to well-ventilated safety? The horror, the terror, the breathlessness. It's all too much to handle. SCP-681 capitalizes on that fear and follows folks around. As of right now, it's contained in a series of grounded pressure tanks and watched over carefully, but if anything were to happen to these containers, stuff could go sideways. It was discovered in a warehouse after all sorts of unexplained asphyxiation deaths occurred. The Foundation arrived and figured out that the gas was actually quite sentient, and would find its way into the airways and sinus cavities of anything with brain waves that it could sense. So wherever this gas is, it wants to suffocate people. And the thing about helium gas is that it doesn't have a smell, and people don't often realize that they're not getting any oxygen if they're surrounded by it. Historically, it's been deadly because it's hard to detect, but easy to breathe. So with the addition of the whole brainwave seeking bit, this gas can really mess people up. There are dozens of canisters of this stuff, and these kinds of things often fail, so you'd better watch out. Apparently the Foundation has done a poor job of keeping track of the canisters too. Unfortunate. Currently, they have a few measures to ensure that it doesn't escape again. Folks working around it are given oxygen masks to put on at the first sign of trouble, and there are plenty of siphoning tools ready to use at a moment's notice. If all else fails, they put helium where it's best recognized, in latex balloons. However, if it's in one of the balloons, it will still attempt to float towards and asphyxiate nearby sentient creatures. It's a balloon though, so not much harm is done. Get this, if you put the helium in a balloon animal, it will start to take on aggressive traits of whatever creature it resembles. Damn, an angry balloon dog, or maybe just a snake. Just make sure not to pop them, because that's when things can get really dangerous. Coming in at number 4, we've got SCP-3671. What did you have for breakfast this morning? I went with coffee and a pumpkin pastry, but most folks would opt for something different. Bacon and eggs is a classic, but it's become harder to get done with modern work expectations. Of course, you can get all that bacon and eggy goodness in a breakfast sando, which honestly might improve on the classic. There's fruit cups, there's yogurt, but there's also cereal. Essentially a vehicle for marketing colorful characters with a bit of nutrition on the inside of the box. Just be careful pouring yourself a bowl of crunchy goodness. Your cereal box might have been replaced with SCP-3671. This SCP is a sapient box of off-brand cereal that seems to manifest a new package of contents each morning. All part of a balanced breakfast, of course. When the Foundation started to experiment upon this box, they got all sorts of examples of funky cereals. Strawberry squares, bacon-flavored corn pops, granola pieces covered in chocolate. It all sounds pretty good, to be honest. But then the attending researcher accidentally ripped the box. 3671 was not happy about this. The label changed to say something simply awful, and the contents the next morning were less than edible. The cereal was replaced with razor blades, then thumbtacks, then bullets of various calibers. The box's label changed over time too, detailing violent acts and cereal-based puns. Yikes. One day, it seemed to return to normal and produce some average-looking cornflakes. Wrong. They contained lethal amounts of cyanide. All in all, this is a very dangerous box of cereal, one on a quest for revenge and out to destroy the humans who ripped its box. The latest discoveries have been plastic explosives, more threats, and human teeth. Somehow these teeth match the composition and genetic material of the researcher who ripped the box. This is one morbid breakfast item. So keep an eye out for any changes in your morning routine. It's hard to start the day right when your bowl is full of deadly poison. Coming in at number 3, we've got SCP-3181. Cognitohazards are always a blast, am I right? Changing the way our brains work and all. Some are extremely dangerous and could tear the fragile fabric of our society if given too much leeway. Others just kind of make weird stuff happen. You let me know which one of those categories applies to 3181. It's a KFC in Oklahoma that challenges our perception of the word boneless. Here's a direct example from the wiki. Within the confines of SCP-3181, the concept of boneless is distinct from the lack of bones. Something can be boneless despite possessing bones, and the lack of bones is irrelevant to whether or not something is boneless. Furthermore, any object, event, location, information, etc. can be sensibly described as boneless or not boneless. Interesting to say the least. I'm going to continue on reading right from the wiki for the sake of clarity and coherence because it's hard to discuss otherwise. The following generalizations have been made about bonelessness. Any two things that are mostly identical will either be both boneless or both be non-boneless. The probability of two things sharing the same bonelessness status decreases as differences accrue between them. All non-boneless things except for food products have similar boneless counterpart, which can be conceptualized and often created. The reverse is not true, as several boneless things are dissimilar from all known non-boneless things. A subject's ability to render something boneless is proportional to their will to accomplish a task, and only weakly proportional to their skill at the acts necessary to do so. Somewhere between 10 and 40% of all things are boneless, depending on how things are quantified. Boneless things are considerably more desirable than comparable non-boneless things. Canines are unique in preferring non-boneless things. Ordained priests of any Christian denomination are always boneless. Other humans are almost never boneless. Things that appear angry, insufficiently clothed, or internet connected are more likely to be boneless. Temperature is irrelevant to bonelessness unless it results in an obvious qualitative change. Food products are never boneless. Puzzle that one out. It's essentially a meme come to life, and one that makes communication concerning whether or not something is boneless more difficult than usual. Try not to think about it too hard, lest the whole world fall victim to the boneless masses. And don't even get me started on the Ollie variation. Only true skaters are gonna get that one. Coming in number 2, we've got SCP-6102. How to approach this one? It's quite upsetting when you think about it, but the way that this document is presented makes it difficult to comprehend outright. It appears to be a wiki entry from some point in the future, a world where there are literally millions of SCPs, and the Foundation has employed auto-archivists to sift through abandoned places in search of anomalies. See if you can puzzle out what they're trying to tell you. They found an entity that was described as something with 4 outer limbs covered in a thin layer of flesh. These auto-archivists apply the 4 pillars of reason to the entities, which are capability, permanence, intelligence, and deification. deification. In terms of capability, this thing was unable to be properly tested as it lacked any sort of compatible port for data transfer. When testing permanence, they attempted to lacerate the fleshy layer, resulting in a so-called blaring sound. Then, testing intelligence, the auto-archivists applied a plethora of tests meant to quantify all sorts of potential types of knowledge. They came away finding that it lacks purpose. Deification couldn't be properly tested, although they did find a carbon-based object in the entity's oral cavity. Take a look at this. It's an old soother. Wait, is this thing a baby? And finally, at number 1, we've got SCP-3035. Roaches are raunchy enough to start with, but when you have a batch like this, may something have mercy on your soul. The Foundation discovered a particular breed of roaches that were very good at superficial mimicry. They will see what another being is doing and do their best to replicate that action. Another detail worth noting is that these bugs are faster at picking up behaviors from each other. So if one looks at another mimicking something else, they'll start a bit of a feedback loop scenario. The researcher who decided to perform experiments on the bugs soon noticed that they were mimicking him. As he typed at his computer, they would stand in front of the glass of their enclosure and make tapping sounds. As he walked around and sat down in chairs, so too would they strut on 2 legs and seek out objects to perch upon. Eventually, he had doll furniture installed in their enclosure to allow them to more accurately mimic his actions. This is when they started growing. They got bigger by degrees at first, but soon they were growing exponentially. And after he performed an autopsy on one of the cockroaches, they did the same to one of their own. When the bugs grew 150% larger overnight, the researcher decided to euthanize them all. But his next email was nothing but a bunch of random text, as if someone had been banging on his keyboard. Uh-oh.
And coming in at number 5, SCP-1750.
Autobots, roll out.
Reptilian Transformers? Sounds terrifying already. This animalistic ancient consciousness has the power to possess petroleum-based vehicles, anything from automobiles to propeller-powered aircraft. With an SCP class of Keter, this autonomous consciousness seems to have breached special containment procedures recently and is moving quite fast and quite furious. The Foundation is collaborating with overseas governments, automotive manufacturers, and environmental protection agencies to advance the development and understanding of this phenomenon. Mobile Task Force MU-13 is working with the Department of Analytics to investigate and neutralize 2 vehicles and petroleum-based machines that may be affected by SCP-1750 as we speak. Affected vehicles should be delivered to Foundation Disposal Site 93 for recycling and containment. I wonder if the Foundation has a back parking lot, just a bunch of haunted Supras. I don't know. SCP-1750 vehicles animated by the phenomenon display animal-like behaviors with similarities to serpents, crocodiles, and birds. Terrifying. Possibly a Jurassic consciousness. There does not seem to be any underlying pattern or cause to the phenomenon. Exorcisms specialized for reptilian ectomorphs have proven the most effective at neutralizing SCP-1750, which also end naturally once the vehicle runs out of fuel source. Okay, that's a good sign. Just needs oil and blood to survive. It is hypothesized that 1750 is the result of dinosaur-based ectomorphs inhabiting the fuel in the vehicles from a fossil fuel energy source based in a prehistoric energy. This would similarly explain why SCP-1750 has not occurred in electric or hydraulic powered machines. There have been 5 examples of interest as of now, and the agency is actively pursuing the recovery of 2 vehicles. SCP-1750 is actively possessing an oil tanker currently submerged in the Atlantic Ocean off the Gulf Coast of Mexico near the floor of the ocean. The oil tanker has apparently been witnessed showing characteristics of shark-like or croc-like behavior, hunting whales and other large predators. Imagine just a giant megalodon submarine with teeth? Yeah, I'll leave that one up to the professionals. I'm also not really a strong swimmer. Okay, so Transformers, cool. Or Decepticons, more like. And coming in at number 4, SCP-58. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. Well, let's hope not. This next one sounds like it could cause a heart attack just talking about it. And no, I'm not talking about your ex. I'm talking about SCP-58, or better known as the Heart of Darkness. Sounds like something you'd find in Zelda. This SCP has recently been contained and returned by authorities to the Foundation's premises. Thank God. This Keter class anomaly is a large, inanimate bovine heart with various arthropod-like appendages and tentacles. I'm sorry, what does it have? It's highly hostile to all forms of life, and when it was discovered, had decimated its way through an entire town. Heartbreak City, huh? While also killing hundreds of individuals in its wake, it was eventually stopped after being pinned under masonry from the building that it had collapsed on top of it. Given the Keter class designation due to the extreme difficulty containing it, with it orchestrating various attempts and even some successful containment breaches, the Heart of Darkness is a slippery one to handle. Large in its size with 4 legs, 4 tentacles of unknown length, and a stinger, the heart can move on its own. and pretty damn fast. The tentacles are covered in razor-sharp spines and can also be used as a whip at a distance of about 10.5 feet. At speeds of a minimum of 200 miles per hour, this SCP is highly resilient to trauma and extremely vicious, and will use every opportunity to escape. A bullet is almost as fast as this thing. No, you heard it right. In short bursts, it is capable of movement, both horizontal and vertical. It has the ability to accelerate to full speed in less than 2 seconds. It has been shown to use its tentacles for increased leverage and stability, as well as using them to pull itself to other surfaces at high speeds. SCP-58 possesses the ability to speak, although scientists are unable to figure out where the sounds are being made and transported from. Its voice is that of an elderly British male with a slight lisp and deep voice. SCP-58 talks constantly, regardless of conditions, even when it's attacking. 58's voice and pace of speech remain unchanged. Terrifying. Speeches made by 58 lack any concrete relations to events, persons, or exterior locations. I wonder if he sings. Hey, do you know Closer to the Heart by Rush? No? Just asking. Thankfully, this SCP has recently been contained, and the Heart of Darkness is being held at an unmarked location. Whew. Coming in at number 3, we have SCP-306. This next case reminds me of Dr. Kirk Connor's Lizard in Spider-Man. Maybe this is where Stan Lee got his inspiration from. At first, this SCP seems harmless, even cute, though appearing to resemble a frog or toad in nature. This phenomenon is actually a fungus. 306 can infect humans through inhalation of spores or by skin-to-skin contact. Sounds like another pandemic to me. Initial symptoms of infection can include coughing and sneezing and skin lesions. Okay, so far not so bad. Lesions caused by 306 display to become warts and reach full size after approximately 2 days. Lesions that fall from the body of infected subjects are light enough to be carried by wind and capable of spreading 306 spores for years to come. That makes it a little hard to contain, no? SCP-306 hosts have an appearance similar to amphibians, but correspond to no known species. SCP-306 was discovered in Louisiana in a swampy area when locals reported a colony of unknown amphibious humanoid creatures coupled with a string of unexplained disappearances. 306 appears to infect mainly humans, however, has been shown to grow in and on nearly every biological matter. Autopsies of deceased 306 hosts have revealed that internal structures remain morphologically similar to human organs following amphibian metamorphosis. That sentence is probably the most horrible thing I've ever said out loud. Basically, this bacteria will turn you slowly into an amphibian while keeping you somewhat human-like a half-human, half-frog. Warm and cold-blooded at the same time. Hazmat teams are to remove and examine personnel for signs of infection. Infected personnel are to be quarantined, affected areas to be sterilized. Any items making physical contact with infected subjects or 306 residue are to be incinerated immediately. All water and sewer systems are to be sealed, and preventing SCP-306 from infecting any large body of water is an Alpha class priority. Makes you think if the planet was once ruled by dinosaurs or just a mutated case of 306 has gone wrong. You tell me. Number 2, SCP-679. This next one is a highly infectious one and very transmittable, and I felt that it deserved to be on this list of SCPs that have had a history of escaping due to its sporadic and contagious qualities. SCP-679 is a pathogen-spread fungal infection related to an unknown Aspergillus species, discovered in Florida firstly recently among the homeless population. This highly infectious organism attacks the eyes, optical nerves, sinus, and eventually the brain, leaving only black tentacle-like receptacles outside of the face and eyes. In early stages, subjects complain of entopic phenomena and eye hallucinations. Hosts are subject to horrific visions. Irritated, itchy eyes resembling pink eye is reported. Subjects then report seeing tiny bright dots moving rapidly in their field of vision similar to floaters after staring at a wall or screen for too long. After about a week of exposure, the sclera turns black and the subject loses vision completely, rendering them blind. Small ulcerations then appear in the corners of the eyes after a day, and this causes the vitreous humor to begin leaking out, having the appearance of thick, black tears. This is basically venom attacking your eyes in a black, thick alien goop, is it not? Okay, that's 2 Spider-Man references, Kyle. Knock it off. After days of leaking, the eyes begin to rot entirely within the skull, a process sped up by the fungus and excruciatingly painful for the host. At this time, the fungus becomes mobile, and individual threads and tentacles gain mobility around the face and eyes. Guys? They move around the subject's face in seemingly random patterns, and once the fungus begins moving on its own, subjects report their vision returning. But how can they see if they don't have eyes? The fungus appears to have photosensitive cells as well as a poorly understood ability to interface with optic nerves and brain cells. Subjects begin to use vision in very different ways, and in some cases even say their vision is enhanced, seeing more spectrums of color and shape. And this is the scary part. Whenever a human with normal, uncontaminated eyes enters the SCP-679's field of vision, subjects experience terrifying hallucinations, all of which seem to drive the host closer and closer to the possible new host. Once a new host is in range, the mycelia reach out and grab the uninfected human's eyes and latch onto the new face. That's terrifying. Like just reaching out from your face to another face trying to find a new host. Basically just trying to find a new set of eyes to feed on. Treatment has been limited by time, and only persons infected within the incubation time have a chance of cauterizing and surgery. The organism is highly contagious and escapes via security constantly. Okay, so like, who are we supposed to call if we find these things? Like, someone's got tentacles out of their face running down the street like Beetlejuice. I need to know who I'm calling. Is there an area code? And coming in at number 1, SCP-1233. This last one makes me scratch my head. I've looked at some of the anomalous space data in the past couple years and have correlated my own homework into some terrifying discoveries. SCP-1233 is a humanoid entity of unknown origin which visually resembles an individual wearing an EMU-2 type spacesuit with clear visors and attached vehicular propulsion jetpacks. The equipment and suit worn by 1233 exhibits a number of anomalous properties. The suit itself has shown durability far exceeding that of a standard spacesuit. Anomaly has had firearms, anti-tank munitions, landmines, white phosphorus munitions, and in one instance total submersion in magma without sustaining any observable damage or decrease in functionality. The suit material, although physically based on NASA engineering, is made out of a material alien to our known universe at this time. 1233's physical strength is correspondingly anomalous. It has demonstrated the ability to lift and throw objects weighing up to 60,000 pounds and can do so repeatedly without showing an external sign of fatigue in defiance of multiple physical laws. This is why this subject is not only unattainable, it's physically impossible to host such an anomaly against its will. 1233 is capable of communicating through a loudspeaker installed in its suit, and does so in a loud, grandiloquent, and declamatory male voice, demonstrating fluency in multiple human languages, and adjusts its speech to conform with whatever language is most commonly spoken by the populace. Sounds like one of those gods our ancients were telling us about, no? Its statements are generally coherent in structure, but are frequently ramblings irrelevant to the present simulation and lacking context. Basically the ramblings of a drunk Superman. Although the phenomena only known as SCP-1233 is rendered harmless and almost friendly, the destruction caused by its simple nature of living can be quite nuclear. The anomaly is usually seen by radar and observatories venturing our atmosphere every 4 to 5 years with a trajectory from the moon. The anomaly claims that its visits are driven by curiosity and status of the galaxy. Okay, so that sounds pretty helpful. Guys at Green Lantern! Satellite Observation Network Argos 1 is to enter Priority 2 High Alert status when Argos 2 detects SCP-1233 in the upper thermosphere. An automated response from any nearby covert facility and disinformation mobile task force will be dispatched to the population center closest to 1233's descent trajectory. After the entity's departure from Earth's orbit, all appearances of damages caused by 1233 are to be accounted for with suitable cover-ups, and in conjunction with media blackouts, and any civilians having witnessed an overt display of effects are to be brainwashed via popular news stations and related sources. Disinformation? City blackouts? Could this Keter phenomenon be related to the UFO mysteries NASA's still hiding? Sounds pretty similar, no?
Coming in at number 5, we've got SCP-4335. Damn, lockdown's gonna make this one terrifying again. Like, what did a whole bunch of folks, including myself, do during that extended period of time indoors? Well, what any sane person would do, get back into Minecraft big time. Is this relatable? I know me and my friends did this, but is it true for everyone else? Regardless, you can't deny the popularity and cultural impact of Mojang's block building simulator. Hell, this recent milk crate trend gives off Minecraft vibes at this point, but I digress. We're here to talk about SCPs, aren't we? And this one is a doozy and a half. SCP-4335 is a strange, unexplainable entity that resides within Minecraft. Folks who stumble across it tend to end up pretty freaked out, and for good reason. It looks like someone took a classic Minecraft skin and colored it all black. No face, no features, no garments, just the darkest of dark colors. For reasons beyond our understanding, it also has a cloud of black smoke particles around its form at all times. Sometimes you might catch a glimpse of yellow eyes or a white mouth, but it's not too often that this happens. Sprouting from its back, we've got a set of black tentacles, akin to those one might associate with Slender Man. It really does sound like something born from a mediocre Minecraft creepypasta, but it goes deeper than that. This form isn't just something that goes around griefing people and spooking them with hyper-realistic eyes and blood. This SCP has a goal and seems pretty good at achieving it. It will move from server to server, often private or single player ones, whenever it pleases. And if anyone goes into creative mode, it hops to a new server too. Somehow, this entity, born within the game, has learned that it is a creation of humans or humanity. It wants out so that it can live a life outside of these bounds. However, it has also decided that humans aren't worthwhile creatures and are motivated by unseemly things. Because of this, SCP-4335 wants to destroy humanity. It has a power that's hard to describe, as outside of a game world it doesn't really make all that much sense. It can create in a way that humans cannot, and it's striving to escape from the digital realm into our own. If and when that happens, things could get very hairy for us reality dwellers. Coming at number 4, we've got SCP-5764. When you navigate to this SCP's entry on the wiki, you'll be presented with only one prompt. Unlike most other pages from the Foundation's files, this one does not feature a classification or a set of containment procedures, just a little bit of text. In red, clickable text, you'll see the words, "Don't click." For those of you who don't want something very heavy weighing on your mind, I'd suggest you follow these instructions. You can stick around if you're curious as to how this one works, as only I have to really experience it to get the idea across. There aren't any cognito hazards or inherent dangers here, but when you click that first prompt, a whole new story opens up. Keep clicking and you'll be responsible for what happens. Alright, you ready to hear what goes on in this entry? If, as a defiant little rat, you click "Don't click," you'll be greeted by another clickable piece of text. This one says, "There is nothing here." But you can click it, and if you do that, you'll get another reading, "There is nothing here." Of course, folks are going to want to keep clicking at this point. If you do so, you get to more emphatically worded pleas not to click, then some threats concerning what might happen to you if you continue, but eventually whatever presence is behind this text relents. They begin talking to you through the information in the clickable text. Apparently they didn't exist until that page was opened, and they will continue existing until you reach the end of the entry. So the more you click and interact with SCP-5764, the closer this entity inches towards death. It's a real emotional roller coaster, with the thing starting out angry, then sad, and then happy that it has someone to communicate with before it goes. Apparently this has happened many times, and the entity knows it will happen again. But the more people that complete this ritual, the shorter its time is before being erased and restarted. At the very end, it bids you adieu, and then you're finally brought to the actual containment procedures. These state that the SCP is an anomaly that affects this page, and every time someone visits it, it gains sentience, and every time they leave the page, it loses it. It can't go anywhere, as the page seems to contain it, so yeah, it can never escape. Folks who read this are also encouraged not to visit the page again, for the sake of the entity. Coming at number 3, we've got SCP-3426. We could very well be screwed by this hard to define SCP. It might have something to do with the pattern screamers, and if you're unsure as to what those are, maybe stay in the dark. Some knowledge is better left unlearned. Or you could watch our video featuring them, but that is up to you. SCP-3426 is a phenomenon responsible for the total extinction of a technologically and socially advanced planetary civilization. What exactly that means is still up in the air. It could be an event, an entity, a concept, or many other vague things. Nobody's really come up with a way to properly define it. However, we do know a lot of the characteristics required for the phenomena to begin. And now that I'm thinking about it, we're not in trouble. Earth is much too primitive a planet to be concerned with destruction like this. 3426 focuses on highly advanced civilizations, ones who have figured out an indefinitely sustainable energy source, perfected space travel, and developed a unified theory of the universe. We're a little bit off from that, eh? And interestingly enough, having an organization like the Foundation is also a prerequisite. If these and a few more criteria are met, it begins. Anomalous material corrosion, reality distortion, and corruption of information media spread across the planet, eventually wiping out all intelligent life. Many planets have already fallen to this phenomena, which we have discovered through some very clever usage of drones and probes. For now, we don't meet the advanced criteria, so we're safe. But it seems we're constantly moving towards a future where we might, so keep an eye out. Coming in at number 2, we've got SCP-6223, the good old Fire and Brimstone radio program, a staple of American horror literature for ages. What's scarier than driving through some backwoods area where all anyone ever listens to is a radio show that paints you as the devil? Better be careful where you stop to eat, right? Well, this radio show is a little more anomalous than your average brainwashing broadcast. It seems to find a way to communicate directly with the sinners it designates and ensures that they have the worst possible time while trying to escape. Headed by DJ Slimy, SCP-6223 is a broadcast that plays in all sorts of backwater places. He fields calls from people looking to confess their sins, although he plays no part in absolving them. This holy broadcaster believes firmly that there is no heaven, that pop culture has sold people the idea of it to push out more products. Nope, hell is the only option for anyone, and finding a nice cozy place in the lake of fire is all that one can hope for. Then he ensures that any listeners are going to join him there by influencing all those around to rip and tear and maim anyone who passes through with a guilty conscience. And the more you listen, the more you hear yourself in the proceedings. It's designated safe, but the doctor investigating swears that one of the people heard on the broadcast sounds just like her. And finally, at number 1, we've got SCP-6002. The world we live in is constantly changing, and we have a whole lot to do with that. Humans have probably had the largest impact on the planet Earth than any other living being since the dawn of time. We build, we destroy, we conquer. A lot of stuff gets swept under the rug as a result. Ever heard of an A-turn? Didn't think so. SCP-6002 is what we can only assume is the Tree of Life. From here, all life sprouts. Like Yggdrasil in Norse mythology, this tree is the symbol of all that is living, and if it were to be destroyed, the rest of life would follow. It seems that the Foundation discovered such a tree in the early 20th century and decided that its traditional wards were not doing enough with it, so they assigned some doctors to it and began research. Bad call all around, as they soon discovered. Every branch of this tree represents a species of living creature, and sometimes even concepts of life and health. If a branch representing an entire breed of dogs were to be broken off, that type of dog would die out entirely. This did end up happening, and the Foundation quickly erased the fact from the common consciousness. But it doesn't seem that they stopped there. An entire classification of living beings, A-turns, seems to be missing from everyone's memory. But if the entry on the wiki is to be believed, A-turns did once exist, and some meddling with SCP-6002 deleted them entirely. It could happen to any living species too. For now, it seems to be mostly under control, but some high-ranking Foundation scientists are dead set on continuing research. Any small mistake could have massive repercussions, so cross your fingers and hope that they don't accidentally phase out your favorite animal, or worse yet, every animal.
And kicking off the list at number 5, we have SCP-096, or also known as the Shy Guy. He's a shy boy, I guess, little shy. Kidding, he's actually terrifying. He's a terrifying boy in that case. SCP-096 is a humanoid creature who is actually really chill. He's super calm, cool, and collect, that is, until you look at his face. So if you want to have a chat with the Shy Guy, you might have to do it over text message. Just don't FaceTime. For the love of God, do not click FaceTime. Because once you look at his face, it enters a stage of emotional distress. It will cover up its face and start losing it. I mean, it screams and it cries. It pretty much has a mental breakdown. And then it starts chasing whoever looked at its face. And after that, well, there isn't exactly an after in this case, if you get what I'm saying. You will then get chased down until it kills you. And then only after that, it will go back to its neutral state. So in this neutral passive state, SCP-096 will passively follow you. So if you're just texting, kind of doing your own thing, it'll kind of wander behind you, maybe poke in, see who you're talking to. Oh, it's that X again? Not a good idea, I don't know. He's just there, right? Like, have you seen Bird Box? Take some notes from Bird Box. So like I mentioned, this thing is really fast. And if you think you can run through a few doors, maybe catch a couple elevators, and Bob's your uncle, you're horribly, wildly mistaken. It will rip through whatever barrier is in front of it. I mean, this thing can rip through elevators. What do you think it's gonna do with your spinal cord? I don't know. And if you want to find this thing and play peekaboo, there are a few locations at the heavy containment zone where you would be able to find the Shy Guy. Locations like Gas Catwalk, three-way Gas Catwalk, the Graded Hallway, and the all-metal corridor, I believe. It has also appeared in the small server room, but that's because an unfortunate guard looked at its face. And that guard was, of course, brutally killed. And number 4, SCP-173. It rhymes. Isn't that neat? Love when that happens. Next up on our list is the Euclid class SCP-173, and it's personally one of my favorites. Now, normally you want to avoid most of these monsters, right? Make as little contact with it as possible, whether that's physical contact or in some cases, eye contact. Well, when it comes to SCP-173, in order to get near it, you need at least 3 people with you. In order for SCP-173 to not kill you, somebody has to maintain direct eye contact with it. And wouldn't it suck if you worked with somebody who went out for a smoke break? They're like, hey, you got this, right? You're like, yeah, for sure, take your time. So what exactly happens if you break this eye contact? Well, SCP-173 will then snap your neck at the base of your skull or strangle you, which I guess would take a long time with my neck, eh guys? I see your comments talking about my noodle neck. I see you all. I'm gonna respond to all of them. Top 5 people that shouldn't be commenting about my neck anymore. Looking right at you, that's right. I'd personally go for the neck snap, way faster, I don't know. Its origins are still unknown, but it's made up of concrete and rebar with a Krylon spray paint thrown into the mix. And the best part of this one, well, at least 2 people have to be staring at it, because even if you blink, that counts as breaking eye contact, even for that tiny amount of time. Maybe you could wink though, if you're just like, I don't know, that's how some dogs blink. It stresses me out. But that's so stressful. Better hope that if you wear contacts, they don't get dry at work, or else you're screwed. And of course, SCP-173 must be locked up at all times. Even after entering the container, you must lock the doors behind you. The only time you would go in is bi-weekly, and that's just to clean up the holding cell, of course. There's this reddish-brown substance on the floor, and apparently it's a fun combination of blood and feces, which sounds perfectly splendid. The sounds that SCP-173 make are reported to sound like scraping stone, which is fun. Even when nobody is inside, this is supposedly a normal thing. And if anybody walks by and they don't hear that, it means we got a problem. And you must report it to the acting HMCL supervisor on duty. Hashtag duty and blood. Gross. Number 3, SCP-682. This one's pretty fun. So SCP-682 is described as a large reptilian monster. Its origin, of course, remains unknown, as most of these are, but this creature is very smart. And at one point, this creature was engaging in a complex conversation with SCP-079, which was also a Euclid class in the form of a microcomputer. So if it can communicate by those means, it's got to be pretty street smart at the same time. Few things to know about SCP-682. It hates all life, ever. You, me, a tree? No siree. So what makes this creature so threatening? Why is it a Keter class? Well, it can move at extremely high speeds, its reflexes are just unreal, and its physical body also changes in size and shape. So this thing will eat a bunch of objects and then grow in size. Or maybe it can just shed a couple pounds of material and shrink down to a small boy. If you want to ask this thing a few questions for some reason, that's a big no-no. Nobody is to attempt communication with it at all. Ever. Period. End of story. Anybody who tries to communicate at all with it will be removed and restrained by force. Imagine that. Imagine the guard just standing there like, bless you. Ah, damn, sorry, I know. Reflexes, sorry. So how does one contain SCP-682? Well, you gotta get a 5 by 5 by 5 meter chamber with a 25 centimeter acid resistant steel plate lining on the inside. The chamber itself should ideally be filled with hydrochloric acid, so much so that SCP-682 is fully submerged in it. It's kind of like a hot tub, but I don't know. If it moves or speaks or does anything at all for that matter, you gotta handle it. You gotta handle it fast and forcefully, because this reptile from hell doesn't play around. Number 2, SCP-409. Now, with Superman's kryptonite being, well, kryptonite, you have to wonder if there's any type of crystal or rock that can do that kind of damage to humans. Well, fun fact, there is, and it's SCP number 409. Known as the contagious crystal, this Keter class crystal stands at 1.5 meters tall and will crystallize any object that comes into contact with it. So it takes about 3 hours to fully convert you into crystals, inside and out. And I thought growing pains were bad. Eek. Now this one is terrifying because it looks harmless. I mean, obviously. In fact, it looks like a large quartz crystal, so it's inviting more than anything. I love rocks. I actually had a rock collection growing up. Probably shouldn't have said that out loud, but it's too late. The only way to carry SCP-409 is by using a granite case. Now, you know we all have those granite cases lying around, you know? You got one in your garage? Cool, use that one. Granite is the only thing immune to this effect, and to this day we're not sure why. This is terrifying because you don't see anything scary, there's no warning. Whereas other SCPs, like the ones that I just mentioned, you kind of have an idea of what you're getting into just by looking at it. Like if there's a lizard in acid, you're like, oh, it's probably bad news. If this SCP was sitting on your granite desk at work, I'm sure you would lose about 8 co-workers within the first week. Cindy walks by, she's like, oh, it's nice, that's for candles. And then just, she's dead, that's it. So what does this even feel like? Well, let me tell you, it's not pleasant. It feels a lot like frostbite. And once your entire body is crystallized, it will then start to make creaky noises. And then, boom, you explode into 1,000 fragments. With force, too. You don't just like kind of crumble and collapse. You go, bah, and you explode. Probably taking out some eyes in the meantime. There's no getting out of that one. So once you touch it, you got a few hours to say your goodbyes. And not even nukes are gonna stop this one. And finally, we saved my favorite for last, number 1, SCP-049. SCP-049 is referred commonly to as the Plague Doctor. And this one hits close to home because I played an evil Plague Doctor at a theme park for an entire month for Halloween a couple years back. That's me. Yep, you can probably tell by the stressed out shoulders and the sick pose. That's how I stood at work all the time. I was like, always about to sneeze. My shoulders hiked up. I love Plague Doctors. I think they're just the creepiest thing already, like just by how they look. Haunting of Bly Manor, one of the background ghosts right off the bat is a Plague Doctor, and I got so excited to see him in the background of all these scenes. And if you love that show and want to know more about these hidden ghosts, Lindsay Ivan did a bang up job with those, so check her out on our Most Amazing Top 10 channel and Top 10 Hidden Ghosts that you missed in the Haunting of Bly Manor. SCP-049 is a bit sicker than your average. This Euclid class SCP is a humanoid entity that of course resembles that of a Plague Doctor. It was discovered in the town of Montauban, which is located in southern France, during a raid. They actually found a few other SCPs called SCP-049-2s, which I'll get into a little later on. So let's talk about the design. These aren't clothes per se. These garments have actually grown out of SCP-49's body. That's quite the beak it's got there, wow. So the best part of this SCP is that just by one touch, it can kill you. And then after that, it roasts you and talks about how you did little to kill the pestilence. And yes, when I worked at this theme park, I was able to talk to guests, and yes, I had an absolute amazing time saying that to everybody. So after its touch of death, it will use whatever it has in its medical bag to bring you back. Only you come back as a zombie type humanoid. Yeah, those are the SCP-49-2s that I mentioned earlier. So after this point, it can control you. You have basic response and motor functions, but ultimately this Plague Doctor decides what your day entails.
Coming in at number 5, we've got SCP-4966. How cute. Look at this chubby little seal pillow. It's so gray and round and huggable. Is it even a seal? Looking at it, it's like a gray tube lump plushie with a little neutral face and 4 limbs popping out the bottom. Honestly, you could project all sorts of different personalities and animals onto this thing and they would fit quite well. It's a fun little friend for anyone. Plus, it's actually quite animate. This little stuffing-filled friend makes a variety of cat-like noises and loves to socialize. In fact, if you leave it alone for too long, it'll start getting anxious and withdrawn. When it's hanging out with other organisms though, it likes to emulate their behaviors and actions to the best of its abilities. So even though it doesn't need to eat, drink, or breathe, it'll do its best to pretend that it's doing these things while around other creatures with biological requirements. This behavior is all cute and fun for a while, but SCP-4966 has a dark side hidden behind the adorable visage. If a corpse is left in the vicinity of it for any extended period of time, it will open its mouth exceptionally wide to consume said corpse. If the body is bigger than 4966, it'll still be able to subsume it entirely and will more or less take on the shape of what it's eating. This causes 4966 to become misshapen and unsightly, at least for a little while. Eventually, it will digest the corpse and return to normal. During the time that it's digesting the corpse, its plush body will take on different traits of whatever is inside of it. Oftentimes, this means generating additional limbs or taking on shapes that resemble what it's eating. After about 4 hours, it'll regurgitate a lovely mass of almost unrecognizable material that's biologically consistent with the original body. Yuck. If it eats a person, it often gains access to vague versions of their memories. This proves particularly interesting when the Chaos Insurgency staged an assault on the facility where 4966 was being kept, and the Foundation fed the dead members' bodies to the plushie to see what they could figure out. However, 4966 often speaks like an insufferable child and only really attempts to recollect when bribed with food, so you can imagine how this whole thing went down. I'm just glad we don't have a mutant plush eating dead bodies out in public, especially if the thing takes on properties of said dead bodies. Coming in at number 4, we've got SCP-5787. Staying on the topic of food and consumption, this anomaly occurs in a wicked cheesesteak joint out in Philly. Geno's, I think it's called. Like most legendary local restaurants, there's a very specific culture associated with the place. Orders have weird names, and the folks running the place don't take kindly to folks who don't want to use their lingo. However, messing up your order at SCP-5787 isn't just gonna earn you a couple dirty looks and maybe a head shake or two. It could mean you ceasing to exist altogether. Let me explain. If you want to order a cheesesteak with cheese whiz and onions, you could ask for a whiz wit. If you wanted a cheesesteak with cheese whiz and no onions, you'd say whiz without. Kinda weird at first, but not super hard to figure out. You better get it fast though, because if you go to Geno's 3 times and mess up your order each time, you're dematerializing. Poof, just like that. Sorry dude, should have been more careful while ordering your regional delicacy. For a while, nobody knew where the poor saps who goofed up threefold ended up, but the Foundation, being a very persnickety and answer-oriented organization, sent somebody to find out. As it turns out, the unfortunate Wit-Wit-Out Welchers end up in a gorgeous room, speaking with an entity resembling the Quaker Oats guy. He explains that the Wit-Wit-Out system is so gloriously simple that goofing it up actually puts the universe a little out of whack. The offending individual is then brought to meet the great Wit-Wit-Out, an amorphous Lovecraftian mass of cheese whiz, beef, and onions. This blob of regional cuisine will then demand to be eaten to restore balance to the universe. If the person does so, they will rematerialize across the street from Geno's, vomit, and then return to the sandwich shop to order a cheesesteak correctly. What a world we live in. I just don't think that the world at large, especially in the Uber Eats era, would be able to handle such a strict set of rules, let alone deal with the consequences of failing to follow them. Not everyone is as mentally strong as a cheesesteak fan from Philly. Coming in at number 3, we've got SCP-5062. What a weird and creepy room. Although it does enact some positive change in the world, so it can't be all that bad. Known as the Cleansing Room, this is a space for positive change and self-mutilation. It's a balance. 5062 is a room in the Echo Hotel in Moscow and went unnoticed for years. However, one day a young girl who was staying there realized there was something wrong with it. A pair of scissors appeared before her and she realized that the only way out of the room was to cut the tip of her fingernail. She did so, left the room, and told her parents about the materializing scissors and the compulsion to remove a part of herself with them. The Foundation was alerted, and since then they've been studying the room. Apparently anyone who finds themselves inside will be presented with a pair of scissors, usually of differing sizes depending on what they need to chop off. Person must then go through with a body part removal, and then they'll be allowed to leave. And usually after this, they'll go on to be a more generous and socially minded individual. The severity of the self-inflicted injury seems to be correlated with the lifestyle of the affected individual, where people who have committed antisocial acts must remove more of themselves. It seems that folks who did terrible things before being cleansed go on to do really positive things afterwards. Like a petty fraudster lost his tongue and then went on to donate plenty of money to victims of fraud. A D-class took off his finger and then became a better team player, ending up working an office job instead of doing crimes. Weirdest of all, a serial killer ended up cutting off his own head, but still somehow managed to run for public office and pass a bunch of laws helping the homeless. His headlessness wasn't noticed by his constituents. So maybe this one isn't all that bad, but I don't know how I feel about folks going in just to chop off pieces of themselves. Coming in at number 2, we've got SCP-1006. Hey kids, you want to do some spider communism? Come on, it'll be fun! That's exactly what you're getting with SCP-1006, an enormous colony of Marxist spiders who live in the woods and work for each other. It's actually quite impressive, the feats they're able to pull off. These arachnids are able to distribute propaganda via web writing and tend to draw the faces of passers-by to get their attention. They even knock down trees and block paths to keep folks in the general area so they can do their best to communicate with them. In fact, when given paper and ink, the spiders are able to communicate quite clearly, handing over manifestos that critique Western imperialism, the bourgeoisie, and also ask for less mosquito spraying in the area. They've amassed quite a large amount of food for themselves too, with a crazy amount of dead animals and insects being found in the area. And while folks may have differing opinions on communism as a whole, this version isn't really meant to benefit humans. We're the oppressors in this case, and the spiders would like nothing better than to dismantle our society and take back the world that is rightfully theirs. Which doesn't sound so good from our perspective. Radical ideas are pretty spooky when you benefit from the status quo, eh? And finally at number 1 we've got SCP-754. Watch your step, especially if you've got some tattoos. Hell, keep an eye out for any strange movements in the foliage. SCP-754 is a plant superficially similar to morning glory or field bindweed. This one grows extra fast though and can take over objects in very short periods of time. Its rapid proliferation has proven to be quite difficult to deal with, and if left unchecked, these vines will cause more problems than they're worth. They can overgrow entire areas and tangle up people, sometimes resulting in death. But that's not all. They can also grow in non-traditional ways, like onto paper as drawings, or along walls as graffiti, or on people's skin as tattoos. They can be stopped via incineration, but that's about it. So if you're not careful, folks could find themselves strangled by super fast vines, or even physically restricted by images of vines appearing on their skin. The Foundation has tried to prevent the growth as much as possible, but 754 is always looking for new places to extend its tendrils.
Coming in at number 5, Cyclops. I mean, we can't have a giant creature list without including one of the most infamous giants in history, Cyclops. Hailing from Greek mythology and then later Roman mythology, the Cyclops were giant one-eyed creatures who can be distinguished in 3 groups. In Hesiod's theogony, they're the brothers Brontes, Steropus, and Argus, I think, who provided Zeus with his weapon, the Thunderbolt. In Homer's Odyssey, they are an uncivilized group of shepherds, the brethren of Polyphemus encountered by Odysseus. Cyclopses were also famous as the builders of the Cyclopean walls of Mycenae and Tyrannus. For the sake of avoiding confusion, let's focus our attention to the Homeric Cyclopses. In an episode of Homer's Odyssey, the hero Odysseus encounters the Cyclops Polyphemus, the son of Poseidon, a one-eyed man-eating giant who lives with his fellow Cyclopses in a distant land. They live in the world of men rather than among the gods. Homeric Cyclopses are presented as uncivilized shepherds, savages, and have no regard for Zeus. They live solitary lives and have no government. They are said to be inhospitable to strangers, slaughtering and eating all who come to their land. Coming in at number 4, Corb or the Fomorians. The Fomorians are a supernatural race in Irish mythology, often portrayed as hostile and monstrous beings who come from under the sea or the earth. However, later they were portrayed as giants and sea raiders and enemies of Ireland's first settlers. They appear to have once been gods who represent the harmful or destructive powers of nature, personifications of chaos, darkness, death, blight, and drought. In Old and Middle Irish, the race is typically called the Fomor or Fomori, with an individual member being called a Fomor. They are often regarded as malevolent spirits dwelling underwater and in the nether regions of the earth, before later being portrayed as the aforementioned sea raiders. This was heavily influenced by the Viking raids on Ireland that were taking place during this time. Oftentimes they were depicted as having the body of a man and the head of a goat, and according to an 11th century book they are said to have one eye, one arm, and one leg. Coming in at 3, Titans. Hailing from Greek mythology, the Titans were the pre-Olympian gods. According to the theogony of Hesiod, they were the 12 children of the primordial parents Uranus and his mother Gaia, with 6 male Titans, Oceanus, Cous, Creus, Hyperion, Lapetus, and Cronus, and 6 female Titans called the Titanides. Cronus mated with his sister Rhea, and together they became the first generation of Olympians. Zeus and his 5 siblings Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. Descendants of the Titans are also called Titans. The Titans were also former gods, the generation of gods preceding the Olympians. They were ultimately overthrown as part of the Greek succession myth, which told how Cronus seized power from his father Uranus and ruled the cosmos with the Titans as his subordinates. Now Cronus and the Titans were in turn defeated and replaced as the ruling pantheon of gods by Zeus and the Olympians in a tenure referred to as the Titanomachy. As a result, result of the war, Cronus and the vanquished Titans were banished from the upper world, being held imprisoned under guard in Tartarus, although according to history some of these Titans were allowed to remain free. Coming in at 2, Fatchin. Hailing from Scottish folklore, the Fatchan or Fatchin is a monster or giant described by John Francis Campbell in popular tales of the West Highlands, as having a single eye in the middle of its face, a single hand protruding from its chest instead of arms, and a single leg emerging from its central axis. Not only that, but it has a single tuft of hair on the top of its head, which Campbell says, I quote, "It were easier to take a mountain from the root than to bend that tuft." Quite the tuft indeed. However, Campbell isn't the only writer to reference the giant. Douglas Hyde did so too in his collection of Irish folklore called Beside the Fires. I quote, "He held a very thick iron flay club in his skinny hand and 20 chains out of it, and 50 apples on each chain of them, and a great venomous spell on each great apple of them, and a girdle of the skins of deer and roebuck around the thing that was his body, and one eye in the forehead of his black-faced countenance, and one bare, hard, very hairy hand coming out of his chest, and one veiny, thick-soled leg supporting him, and a close, firm, dark blue mantle of twisted, hard, thick feathers protecting his body. And surely he was more like unto devil than to man." Now, though hailing from different countries, both descriptions seem to represent branches of a common Gaelic tradition. Finally, coming in at number 1, Caicus. Hailing from Roman mythology, Caicus, meaning bad, was a fire-breathing giant and the son of Vulcan. He was ultimately killed by Hercules after terrorizing the Aventine Hill before the founding of Rome. However, let's go back. Caicus lived in a cave in Italy on the future site of Rome. To survive, he feasted on the flesh of humans and would nail the heads of victims to the doors of his cave. Now, like I said, he would later be defeated by Hercules, and according to Evander, Hercules stopped to pasture the cattle he had stolen from Geryon near Caicus' lair. As Hercules slept, the giant took a liking to the cattle and stole 8 of them, 4 bulls and 4 cows, dragging them by their tails so as to leave a trail in the wrong direction. When Hercules awoke, the remaining cattle made suggestive noises towards the cave, so Hercules, now angry, stormed towards the cave, and a terrified Caicus blocked the entrance with a vast, immovable boulder, so Hercules quite literally tore off the top of the mountain to reach him. Caicus responded with spewing fire and smoke, while Hercules attacked with tree branches and rocks the size of millstones. Hercules eventually leapt into the cave, aiming for the area where the smoke was heaviest, and grabbed Caicus, strangling the monster to death. According to Virgil in Book 8 of the Aeneid, Hercules grasped Caicus so tightly that his eyes popped out and there was no blood left in his throat. Yikes.
Number 5 on this list is the whalefish. This fish is like a legendary Pokemon when it comes to how rare it is. Live Science says the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute released footage in August showing a bright orange female whalefish around 6,600 feet deep offshore of Monterey Bay, California. Very little is known about this bizarre fish because of the 3 drastically different appearances of the juveniles, which are called tape tails, males, which are called big nose fish, and females, which are called whalefish. The 3 forms look so different that scientists originally thought that they were 3 different species. This shape-shifting transformation from juvenile to mature females is believed to be one of the most extreme among vertebrates. Whalefish have rarely been seen alive in the deep, so many mysteries remain regarding these remarkable fish. The Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute tweeted, "Let's pull up this image from the Smithsonian that really shows off exactly how weird this fish is." So here we have the 3 fish, and you can see exactly how different they all are. The Smithsonian says there are other examples of males and females with very different shapes and of animals changing from one shape to another as they grow older. But this is one of the most amazing examples of sexual dimorphism combined with metamorphosis ever found among vertebrates. So we are talking literally about a super rare, shape-shifting fish that in my opinion looks creepy as all holy hell. I'd say that you can find this beast at the bottom of the ocean, but odds are you won't ever even run into it because of how rare it is. We've been exploring the bottom of our oceans for quite some time now, and we are only just starting to learn a little bit about this fish. In all honesty, we really have no idea about it though. Whatever it is or whatever it does, one thing is pretty clear to me though. It's creepy looking, it lives at the bottom of the ocean, and I don't like it. Number 4 on this list is the goblin shark. This fish has got to be at the top of everyone's lists when it comes to the grossest looking creatures in the world. National Geographic says, swishing through the deep sea, a goblin shark notices a small, yummy looking squid. The animal inches towards its prey, but as the fish closes in, the snack starts to dart away. So the shark thrusts its jaw 3 inches out of its mouth. The jaw is connected to 3-inch long flaps of skin that can unfold from its snout. The predator then grabs the squid in its teeth. After scarfing down the meal, the shark fits its jaw back into its mouth and swims off. That's right guys, a goblin shark's top and bottom teeth are attached to ligaments or bands of skin tissue tucked into its mouth. When prey is just out of reach, the shark extends the elastic tissue out of the mouth to nab the grub. This allows the animal to chow down on snacks such as teleost fish and squid. It also makes the shark one jaw-dropping fish. These disgusting looking creatures like to live right at the bottom of the ocean and are native to the oceans around Japan. There are also some of them off of South Africa and in the ocean water surrounding Portugal. They can grow to be 12 feet long and weigh almost 500 pounds. These aren't monsters, but they may as well be. A 500-pound beast with a detachable jaw that looks like a goblin just chilling at the deepest, darkest part of the ocean. I truly cannot think of a whole lot of creatures I would rather run into than this freaking thing. Number 3 on this list is the proboscis worm. I don't care what anyone says, this has to be a monster. Just based on literally how freaking gross it is, it needs to be qualified as a monster. This species is also known as ribbon worms, and there are actually a ton of ribbon worms in the world. The ones I'm talking about reside deep at the bottom of the ocean. These ones usually grow to be bigger than the other ones in the world. The Smithsonian Magazine says the largest species of ribbon worm is the bootlace worm, which can be found writhing among rocks in the waters of the North Sea. Not only is it the largest nemertean, but it may also be the longest animal on the planet. Uncertainty remains because these stretchy worms are difficult to accurately measure, but they have been found at lengths of over 30 meters and are believed to even grow as long as 60 meters longer than the blue whale. Despite their length, they are less than an inch around. Now these creatures don't have any natural predators, and let me tell you why. Because they look disgusting. Like, let me ask you guys, would you want to eat that? I would straight up need to be starving and there would literally need to be nothing edible left on the planet other than this thing before I decide to take a bite. It literally looks like a large intestine that just slithers across the bottom of the ocean. Shockingly enough, this is a real thing though, and you can find it chilling in deep waters. Number 2 on this list is zombie worms. We aren't quite done with the worm talk yet, guys, because now we have got to look at zombie worms. Zombies are a pretty terrifying monster, so are these just like them? The Smithsonian says zombie worms don't crave brains, instead they seek bones. The 1 to 3 inch Osedax worms were first discovered in the bones of a rotting gray whale on the deep sea floor nearly 10,000 feet deep in 2002. Since then, more Osedax species have been discovered. There are 26 according to the World Register of Marine Species. Zombie worms don't eat mineral bones directly, instead they digest fats within the bone. However, their style of eating is quite different from ours because they don't have a mouth or a stomach. They secrete an acid from their skin that dissolves bone, freeing up the fat and protein trapped inside. Then, symbiotic bacteria living in the worm's body digests the fat and protein. How Osedax acquire nutrients from the bacteria isn't known. They may simply digest the bacteria, or nutrients are somehow transferred to the worm. They hold on to whatever bones they can find by drilling in with roots which contain the symbiotic bacteria. Zombie worms can retract these plumes into the body when they are disturbed. If all this isn't strange enough, the only worms doing any drilling are female. The microscopic males live inside their bodies. One study counted 111 males inside just one female zombie worm. This eliminates the pesky step of having to search for a mate because the eggs and sperm are right next to each other. Then the worms can disperse many fertilized eggs far and wide, hoping that they land near some recently fallen bones. Needless to say, but these are some weird freaking creatures. No wonder we've nicknamed them zombie worms. They're about as monstrous as you could possibly get. Not to mention, but they feast on the bodies and bones of the dead, similarly to what zombies would want to be doing. Number 1 on this list is the Sloane's viperfish. As with most things on this list, we have a thoroughly disgusting looking creature. This thing is just as dangerous as it is disgusting though. The Twilight Zone says, like many of the inhabitants of the deep sea, Sloane's viperfish sport light-producing organs called photophores along its body. These flashing blue, green, or yellow lights might attract tasty snacks, but they're most useful for masking the fish's silhouette from predators below. They're also useful for grabbing a meal. When prey comes near, the viperfish drops a glowing light on its dorsal fin ray like a fishing lure in front of its mouth and snap. A muscular jaw filled with clear, sharp teeth comes crashing down like a guillotine. Lucky for the viperfish, its first vertebrae has evolved to act as a shock absorber for that powerful bite. This is the deep sea version of a piranha, except way more deadly. If you were getting attacked by piranhas, there would likely need to be multiple of them to attack you to actually win. I could totally see a world though where you lose one-on-one versus this thing though. Its teeth would literally dig so deep in your body. Even at the thickest part of your body, this thing has the potential to go all the way through if it bites you well enough. Thank goodness it's swimming thousands of meters below us and we don't need to worry about it popping up on our next snorkeling adventure.
Kicking off at number 5, Destroy All Monsters, 1968. Alright, probably the best place to start if you're not sure what kaiju cinema is by ramming together pretty much every single kaiju ever and making them throw down in a titanic battle to the death. And I mean, it's probably important to note that this movie features perhaps the most kaiju in any giant monster movie ever. We're talking Godzilla, Mothra, Rodan, King Ghidorah, Anguirus, Manila. It goes without saying, but they're pretty big players, and obviously anytime Godzilla, Mothra and Rodan get together, you know that some pretty big stuff is going to go down. Directed by Ishiro Honda, one of the biggest players in the Showa era of kaiju cinema and one of Toho Studios' best and brightest assets, Destroy All Monsters takes place in a time of pure utopia where world peace has been achieved by the year 1999 and all of the giant monsters that have previously tried to destroy the planet have instead been captured and confined to an area known as Monsterland. However, just when all seems well, all of these monsters are broken out of their metaphorical giant prison and instead mind controlled by an alien species known as the Kilax, who then send the kaiju to attack major cities across the planet. We're talking Godzilla tearing apart New York City, Rodan invading Moscow, and Mothra and her larval offspring laying waste to the cities of Beijing. Thankfully, Earth's defenses, spearheaded by the United Nations Science Committee in their first appearance, eventually wrestle back control of the poor mind control kaiju. But that's when the Kilax send their biggest and baddest nasty of all time, King Ghidorah himself, and then stuff really gets blown to smithereens. The thing is, although not quite campy enough to be mid-70s kaiju brilliance, and not quite gritty enough to be mid-80s and 90s kaiju raw action, Destroy All Monsters sits somewhere between the two, and yet, most importantly, it's just pure fun. Destroy All Monsters is insane, and it's a time where Toho Studios figured, what the heck, we've got all of these monsters, we may as well put them through their paces. Although not a highlight of kaiju history in any way, it sets the precedent for many more to come. Swinging in at number 4, Giant Monsters All Out Attack, 2001. And if you're looking for a real mouthful, then why don't you try Godzilla, Mothra and King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack. Yeah, because who cares about film titles anymore, right? Thankfully for us though, although colloquially dubbed GMK by kaiju monster movie fans, 2001's Giant Monsters All Out Attack is perhaps one of the most accessible kaiju movies ever made. The thing is, whilst it certainly embraces the unabashed cheesiness the earlier Showa era and Heisei era kaiju movies were so famed for, this one was made during the short period known as the Millennium era. And strangely enough, much like the zeitgeist captured in that period of cinema, GMK is surprisingly dark. For a kaiju movie, it's gritty as all hell, and although not perfect in any sense, there are moments in this movie that really turn the franchise on its head. And to address the kaiju elephant in the room, yes, Giant Monsters All Out Attack is hated by certain portions of the fanbase, given the fact that King Ghidorah, the ultimate adversary of all time, is instead the good guy in this story. And that means only one thing: our beloved Godzilla is the villain. Written and directed by Shusuke Kaneko, GMK features Godzilla as a ravenous returning force during a time where the world and the brave and noble JSDF are nervous about where and when Godzilla will strike again. Unbeknownst to them though, Godzilla is actually possessed by the souls of the dead that were lost during the events of World War II. And then the only thing left to do is for an unlikely alliance to be forged between Mothra, King Ghidorah and Baragon. Although the themes aren't always clear in this movie, and although they miss more often than they hit, GMK is one of the most complete giant monster movies of recent times. Although the unconventional Godzilla is kind of a hated theme, start to finish, GMK is entertaining. And that's the most important thing. Next up at number 3, King Kong vs. Godzilla, 1962. I'll be damned if this isn't one of the finest moments in kaiju cinema of all time. Really, to be a fan of this type of cinema, you have to adhere to a certain set of disbelief. When there's a guy in a lizard suit rolling around a fake background, yeah, sometimes it doesn't always work. And whilst that is certainly the case in 1962 King Kong vs. Godzilla, holy moly, if there aren't some absolutely astounding moments of cinema to be found here. It's crazy because what's so great about this genre is that Toho Studios just didn't care. Not in the sense that they didn't put their heart and soul into these movies, because that's exactly what they did. They just didn't do things by a certain playbook. Hollywood be damned as far as they were concerned, because they wanted to put one guy in a lizard suit and one guy in a gorilla outfit and then make the best damn movie that they could. This is the culmination of that very spirit, King Kong vs. Godzilla, and whilst next year there is a remake coming our way, if you've got a spare 90 minutes, just give this movie a watch. Really, this is one of the finest examples of kaiju cinema going, and it's certainly worth your attention. Again, directed by Ishiro Honda and written by Shinichi Sekizawa, the story behind King Kong vs. Godzilla originally began with the giant Lord of the Apes actually throwing down with some version of a giant Frankenstein monster, which, let's not beat about the bush, would have been absolutely awesome, but thankfully for us, Toho snapped out of it and realised that the giant lizard king would be a far greater adversary. Obviously, the narrative behind this movie is pretty self-explanatory, but the cultural impact that this movie has had on science fiction cinema is kind of staggering. There are so many urban myths and legends about this movie that it's worth experiencing that just for the fact, and whilst most of them aren't exactly true, the ending to King Kong vs. Godzilla is one of the most epic conclusions of 20th century cinema. This movie is brilliant, and its historical significance should not be forgotten. Coming in at number 2, Gamera, Guardian of the Universe, 1995. Finally, we have a place to put this movie. And yeah, whatever. This movie isn't scary in the slightest, but my word, if this movie isn't all kinds of marvelous, then I don't know what is. The thing is, we get it. We love Godzilla, we love King Kong, they're the greatest, but until this movie, Gamera was one of the most overlooked kaiju monsters of all time. Put it this way, Guardian of the Universe was both a reboot of the franchise and also the 9th movie featuring the turtle-shelled monster hero. Gamera is persistent, and the payoff, surprisingly, was one of the greatest kaiju movies of all time. Gamera is a kaiju like no other. He's a massive, fire-breathing, prehistoric turtle, and much like his Godzilla brethren, he was mutated via exposure to nuclear weapons. At the start of the kaiju franchise, Gamera was an all-consuming, aggressive force, but slowly, as the franchise evolved, Gamera took a backseat to his other more famous kaiju co-stars, and eventually was forced into a niche, to say the least. You see, eventually Gamera took on a less malevolent force, and instead, he became a defender of humanity, particularly human children, and a guardian of our planet against extraterrestrial alien forces. All all of this finally culminated in his reinvention of a reinvention in 1995's Gamera, Guardian of the Universe, and this movie is astounding because of it. Written by Kazunori Ito and directed by Shusuke Kaneko, again, Gamera, Guardian of the Universe embodies that same spirit that Toho Studios have perfected over the decades. This movie is just freaking fun. It's so fantastically bizarre that you can't help but be entertained. Gyros flying through the skies, attacking people left, right and center, and the giant fire-breathing turtle, who is a friend to all human children, saving the day. In many ways, this entry embodies everything that we love about kaiju cinema, and as a side note, the following Gamera-centric movies are also worth a watch. Again, if you're looking for some 90 minutes of entertainment, you really cannot go wrong with Gamera. And finally, coming in at number 1 spot, Gojira, 1954. It just has to be, doesn't it? And whilst over here at Top 5 Scary Videos, we do indeed favour doing things a little differently when it comes to picking our particular movie entries. We don't need that here. You see, kaiju monster movies already speak for themselves in that regard, or well, roar for themselves, I guess. And 1954's Gojira, the most important giant monster movie that has ever emerged from Japan, exemplifies that fact entirely. This is the definitive Godzilla movie, and still to this day, over 60 years later, 1954's Gojira is unrivaled. It is astounding how well this movie is held up, and much like some of the suit work seen in King Kong vs. Godzilla, some of the scenes that were captured in this movie were hallmark moments in science fiction cinema. Following its release, Ishiro Honda, the man behind 1954's Gojira and one of Toho Studios' most legendary kaiju contributions, said, "If Godzilla had been a dinosaur or some other animal, he would have been killed with just one cannonball. But if he were equal to an atomic bomb, we wouldn't know what to do. So I took the characteristics of an atomic bomb and then applied them to Godzilla." You see, this is exactly why kaiju monster movies captured something so special. They exemplified an era, a period of Japanese history that was still trying to recover from the horrors of the Second World War. In fact, the destruction seen throughout this black and white B-movie, metaphorically speaking, still can rival some of the most expensive and well-produced giant monster movies ever made. 1954's Gojira is a masterclass in how to make a giant monster truly terrifying. Low angles, ample pacing on the reveal, high-angled shots of the ant-like human survivors fleeing in terror. Gojira is sci-fi horror 101. Whilst this genre isn't exactly for everyone, the influence it has had on the horror genre is undeniable. This movie cemented Godzilla as the definitive, unrivaled giant monster, and since its release way back when in 1954, few films have come close to toppling it.
Coming in at number 5, we've got Slattern. Pacific Rim is just such a wicked kaiju movie, eh? I mean, technically I don't know many people who would classify it as horror, but the smattering of enormous entities is enough to get any monster fan excited. Throughout the flick, it manages to one-up each monster with a bigger, badder beastie. Even the first one could be the main event in a lesser movie, but Guillermo del Toro does not let up. After fighting their way through all the categories of kaiju, the folks from the Jaeger Foundation have one final challenge, the first ever Category 5. Slattern. This thing is wicked. Over 180 meters tall and weighing in at nearly 7,000 tons, it is a force to be reckoned with. It blows all the other kaiju out of the water, which is kind of funny when you think about it because of that nuclear payload that gets detonated moments after it shows up. You know, because all the water is blown away for a moment. Okay, focus. Slattern isn't just huge, it's dangerous. It has 3 insane tails that can pierce armor and whip around at Mach speed. It has a freaky hammerhead that can be used to slam people to smithereens, and it's so toxic and nuclear that its insides are glowing blue. Wow. And the crowning jewel of all sorts of kaiju fits in well here too. It's pretty much immune to any and all attacks. Like, humanity had to develop Jaegers in order to even have a chance against these beasts, and as the first Category 5 to make it through the breach, Slattern is extremely resilient. It takes a long fight, a nuclear explosion, and a nuclear turbine blast point blank to the chest to take it down. That is one heck of a movie monster. Coming in at number 4, we've got sandworms. We've talked about graboids and ass blasters a few times in this channel, but I can't recall any time where I discussed Dune. That ends today with an acknowledgement of one of the most iconic monsters of all time. Oh man, this might not be horror proper either. It's more sci-fi, but oh well. Sandworms are absolutely bonkers. An average specimen can grow to be over 450 meters long, which is half a kilometer. And those are just the observed ones. It's thought that some worms that live in the southern pole areas can grow up to 1,000 meters, although it's never been confirmed. Still, the fact that worms of that size is even possible is nuts, and that is just the length. Sure, it's crazy that they're that long, but their maws are incomprehensibly large too. Some of the gaping mouth holes can be 120 or even 240 meters across. They could swallow entire buildings, no chewing required. Just absolutely enormous, these ones. They're so big, people on the planet Arrakis use them as their distance measuring units. How long will it take to get there? About 5 sandworms. The way their bodies work is pretty nuts too. See, their insides resemble something like a furnace and generate heat and flames. Imagine being a living being who heats up to the point of producing fire. Life is pain, I suppose. Although their tough skin and scales are up to the challenge. These outer pieces of armor are so tough they're basically impenetrable, although if you know what you're doing, the scales can be used to ride the worms, which is pretty cool. Coming in at number 3, we've got Kroll. Alright, we're 3 for 3 here, not exactly hitting the horror nail on the head. But giant monsters are scary all on their own. Whether or not they're featured in true horror movies doesn't matter. Now that I've done my mental gymnastics, let's talk about this gargantuan Doctor Who beast. Ages ago, giant squid were brought to Delta 3, a moon orbiting Delta Magna. Usually it's a bad idea to introduce brand new species to an unprepared ecosystem, and this proves to be true once again when Kroll eats a swampy priest along with a holy relic. After this unfortunate meal, Kroll begins to mutate in unexpected ways. The biggest change of all was definitely his size. Kroll was suddenly a mile wide and hundreds of meters tall. He promptly became the god of Delta 3, living under the mud and munching on whatever he get his tentacles around. The swampies that inhabited the moon began to worship Kroll and saw him as a religious deity. Now they even call the times he surfaces manifestations. I mean, it makes sense. If you were a primitive species of green people living on a moon and a mile-wide squid kept showing up, you'd probably think it was a higher power too. A mile wide. They also rely on the beast to kill their enemies, which he is very capable of doing. Well, until the good doctor rolls up. But hey, not even the biggest of big monsters can stand up to a Time Lord. Coming in at number 2, we've got King Ghidorah. Oh, baby. See, I could have populated this entire list with entries from the Godzilla verse, but then it would just become a Godzilla list. I guess Godzilla Earth could have made the cut too, which would be fun, but it's just not on the agenda today. So I went through all of the iconic beasts and monsters that have at some point fought or teamed up or existed at the same time as Godzilla and tried to find the biggest one. Godzilla itself was up for consideration, but if you've ever seen these two square off, you'll know who the larger lad is. Sporting 3 heads and a wingspan that can block out the sun, King Ghidorah is a massive monster. It makes plenty of appearances across all sorts of movies, but we'll focus on his appearance in Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, which, you know, come on. Well, this Hydra-like being stands at 150 meters tall and has a wingspan of 175. If you want big, you've got it. And those wings better be big too, as he weighs over 70,000 tons. It's a miracle it can get off the ground at all. But once it's up there, it can reach Mach 3. Many Godzilla monsters end up teaming up with the titular icon from time to time, but never King Ghidorah. The two are diametrically opposed, arch rivals, never to see eye to eye on anything, and I can respect that long-standing beef. Between these two, it's on sight. He's a force of pure evil, meant to destroy anything and everything it can. There's no good lurking within, no greater purpose beyond destruction, and he's really good at destruction. Ghidorah can fire gravity beams and destroy city blocks in an instant. He can generate lightning with his wings. He can suck the life force out of anyone foolish to get close. So size isn't the only terrifying thing about this monster. He's got an RPG protagonist's toolbox worth of powers too. And coming in at number 1, we've got Clover. The main monster from Cloverfield. Clover is pretty big, right? Can rampage through New York, toss the Statue of Liberty, and generally cause a lot of trouble. But get this, the towering entity that peers down at the camera in the film's penultimate scene isn't even fully grown. It's just a baby. No wonder it was so cranky. But for real, Clover can get way, way bigger. In the Cloverfield paradox, we get an up-close look at the full-grown abomination. As an escape capsule heads back to Earth, a welcome party is organized, and by welcome party I mean giant monster, and by organized I mean he sticks his head through the clouds. They're cumulus clouds too, so the monster is poking his head through cloud cover at around 1,000 meters above ground level. And the pod is landing over water, meaning that the monster is likely partially submerged too. The average depth of the ocean is a few kilometers deep, and we can't prove that the monster is standing anywhere particularly deep, but I'll let you draw your own conclusions there. We know that the baby is around 100 meters tall, and we know that the adult is poking its head through the clouds above the ocean, so you tell me how tall you think it really is. It definitely dwarfs anything else we've discussed so far. Sheesh. So, does anyone have some sort of inferiority complex now? Are you terrified of getting stomped by one of these and them not even noticing? The world of monsters is pretty crazy, and the bigger they are, the more existential dread they instill.
Kicking off at number 5, Dark Was the Night, 2014.
Probably just some kids playing a prank, huh?
Yeah, why would they come out this far?
Never seen nothing like it. All the animals just vanished.
Alright guys, let's be honest, it's pretty difficult to be completely terrified by any sort of monster movie given enough scale, because the bigger they are, the easier they are to completely phase out any kind of tangible fear. Take note on that, because in this list we'll be scaling our expectations down a little bit, but it may also leave you scratching your head and asking the question, what's the difference between a giant monster movie and a creature feature? I don't get it, Jack. And the answer is, not a lot really, and also, I don't really get it either, but primarily it relies on a trope that coincidentally movies like Godzilla pioneered, and that is the fear of the unknown, but not in the cosmic horror sense, but in not knowing exactly what we're dealing with until it's too late. Let me introduce you to this movie, Dark Was the Night, a straight to DVD B movie that surprisingly is absolutely brilliant, and more importantly, it's pretty bloody scary, and it packs one of the most well written endings to any kind of monster based horror, I think. And you know what? It also stars Kevin Durand in the leading role, the guy who plays Kimi in Lost, Harbard in Vikings, and loads of other mid-caliber roles through movies and television. And in this instance, it's an absolute pleasure to see him take the lead, because he certainly can carry a movie if given the chance. Written by Tyler Heisel and directed by Jack Keller, Dark Was the Night tells the tale of the small isolated town of Maiden Woods, where Sheriff Paul Shields, played by Durand, is investigating a series of bizarre disappearances alongside his new deputy, Donnie Saunders, played by Lucas Haas, who is also pretty damn good in this film. Obviously, as you may imagine, the disappearances have something to do with an ancient evil that lingers in the woods, and that's all I'll say, because the writing behind this movie is pretty remarkable, and for a B movie it's even more impressive. The creature design is fantastic, the pacing is spot on, and the finale to this movie will leave you pretty astounded in some way or another. More importantly, it's just downright entertaining, and whilst these monsters aren't exactly King Kong, they're full to the teeth with horror. Swinging in at number 4, The Monster, 2016.
I know what you think, okay? I know what you think. What is it? What?
And again, another movie that came out in the past decade that seemingly flew beneath the radar and still is pretty damn brilliant. The thing is though, whilst this movie certainly does exactly what it says on the tin, as in, well, the name of this movie is pretty damn clear, it's also important to note that this movie certainly isn't for everyone. If I said to you that it's an A24 movie, then that may clear things up a little, but also if you're in the mood for a subversion of the genre that also deals with some pretty damn terrifying psychological implications regardless, then yeah, this is certainly the movie for you. Also, giant man-eating monsters abound, and all that jazz. Written and directed by Brian Bertino, the man responsible for 2008's The Strangers. If I had to draw a genre comparison for this movie, I'd say that 2016's The Monster is to monster movies as 2012's The Battery is to zombie movies. Yeah, it takes a little bit more to enjoy than the typical sit back and witness the destruction, but that does not mean it's not worthwhile. It tells the tale of Kathy, played by Zoe Kazan, who is pretty remarkable here, and her 10-year-old daughter Lizzie, played by Ella Ballantyne, who are driving to her father's house as it's his turn to share Lizzie's custody. The thing is, from the off, we're overloaded with some pretty stark information. Lizzie, a 10-year-old girl, is sick and tired of taking care of her abusive, alcoholic mother Kathy, and she makes it pretty damn clear that she intends to live with her father permanently. While as the trip stretches on and darkness descends, the pair hit a wolf in their car, killing it. However, on closer inspection, it seems that the wolf was already on its last legs, as it had been attacked by something far bigger and far more ferocious. And yeah, as you may imagine, the rest is spoilers, but really, 2016's The Monster is such a refreshing departure from the norm that it's a must-see in my books. But it also paints itself with the same vivid tropes of the monster genre, as we catch glimpses of a far more terrifying creature in the periphery. Next up at number 3, Cloverfield, 2008. You know what, guys? I've said it before and I will say it again. Cloverfield doesn't get the credit that it deserves, and as far as giant monster movies go that actually do justice to the science fiction horror genre as a whole, then Cloverfield is perhaps one of the closest and most recent depictions of just exactly that. Cloverfield is awesome, and also as a side note, if the whisperings are to be believed, we'll be getting a hopefully worthy sequel to this movie sooner rather than later, which is reason enough to be excited really. The thing is, we spoke in the intro about kaiju movies and how they are the quintessential example of giant monster movies, but as we also mentioned, they also aren't exactly scary. Cloverfield, in my opinion, is the remedy to that, and in turn it was inspired by the reverence that the author J.J. Abrams has as a filmmaker for Godzilla and all of his friends. His intention was to give life to the western version of the kaiju genre, and he did exactly that, whilst also staying true to the promise of horror. For those of you that haven't yet seen it or brushed it off as another Hollywood cash grab, please give it a chance, it's awesome. Written by Drew Goddard, the man behind the brilliant Netflix Daredevil series, and directed by Matt Reeves, the man behind the Planet of the Apes series, Cloverfield of course was put together by J.J. Abrams' Bad Robot Studios with the intention of breathing life to giant monster movies for a western audience. Shot from a found footage perspective, it tells a tale of a man named Rob Hawkins and his then girlfriend Beth, who whilst during a party in downtown New York City find themselves in the midst of a giant monster attack in which the city itself is torn asunder by a terrifying unknown alien lifeform. You see, the original Godzilla movies have analytically been related to the devastating World War II atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, a metaphorical cultural expression of the tragedy that unfolded. Subsequently, in many ways, Cloverfield has been tied to New York City's own tragic destructive event with the 9/11 attacks. For that reason, and that reason alone, I think Cloverfield deserves its place as a cultural titan of sci-fi and horror. It truly does. Coming in at number 2, The Host, 2006. Alright guys, this is where things get difficult, because in many ways, 2006 The Host is perhaps one of the finest monster movies ever made. Period. This movie truly is remarkable, and whilst we've covered it on several occasions in our Korean horror movies list, in relation to monster movies, we really can't let it slip on by like an amphibious radioactive sea creature slipping beneath a sewer. The thing is though, where it becomes difficult is that like several movies on this list, The Host is a genre mashup of sorts. This is a movie about family and loss and grief, and also a bizarre mixture of action and black comedy that is actually hilarious in parts, in places that it really shouldn't be. I mean, it's a result of South Korean filmmaking as a whole being incredibly transcendent with genre, playing with themes and tropes that Western directors wouldn't otherwise do, and yet truth be told, the results are startling. It makes for a movie the likes of which can't be replicated, and that alone is reason enough to see it. Also, please don't get this movie confused with the 2013 movie The Host, because no thank you. Written and directed by Bong Joon-ho, the awesome South Korean director and man behind Snowpiercer, which you should also take a look at if you haven't, The Host tells the tale of Park Gang-do, a slow-witted guy who runs a snack bar on the banks of the Hum River, who witnesses his daughter Hyun-so get kidnapped by a gigantic, grossly mutated amphibious creature that was created by a secretive chemical spill and subsequent cover-up by US authorities, which then subsequently sends the city of Seoul into complete and utter mayhem, as you may imagine, really. Obviously spoilers are abound from here on in, so we'll leave it at that, but really, The Host does something incredibly impressive with the giant monster genre. It's terrifying, it's hilarious in places, and most importantly, this giant monster movie actually has heart. Maybe even like 3 hearts, actually. Probably. And finally, coming in at number 1 spot, Troll Hunter, 2010. Alright guys, you wanted giant monster movies, you got it. Now, I've certainly ummed and ahed about it, and after lengthy deliberation, I'm fairly certain that this movie delivers everything we've ever wanted when it comes to being awestruck by a species of creature that domineers our very human-sized landscape. Troll Hunter is exactly that. It's smart, it's well executed, and most importantly, this film is gigantic in scale. The thing is, I think quite a lot of people brush this movie off as too ridiculous to ever have been worthwhile, and whilst you may be thinking that the notion of trolls are an overbaked concept in folklore, never mind in horror cinema, the best part of this film is that most importantly, it believes in itself. At not a single point in this movie did I ever stop and think that visual authenticity was important to this film, because it's not. Hey, in some instances the visuals behind this movie aren't exactly great, but you know what supersedes that? The suspension of disbelief. I believe in this movie because from start to finish, much like with Cloverfield, what we are witnessing is the documentation of events from a human perspective. You see, it may seem obvious, but the giants in the movie are far more giant if you see them through the eyes of the terrified creature trying to survive on the ground. Hint, that's us humans. I don't know guys, I could ramble on about this movie for days, but as far as giant monster movies go, Troll Hunter is one of the finest examples ever made. Written and directed by Andre Ovredad, the man responsible for the autopsy of Jane Doe, which is also awesome, Troll Hunter tells the tale of a group of students from Volda University College who set out to make a documentary about a suspected bear poacher out in the Norwegian wilderness. Well, they soon find the bear poacher, but as they also soon find out, it's certainly not bears that he's after, but a far bigger and far more terrifying kind of creature. Honestly guys, Troll Hunter is awesome. It really is. If you haven't yet seen it, please give it a watch. You won't be disappointed.
Coming in at number 5, we've got SCP-1548. Quick, name some enormous things. Elephants, office buildings, Mount Everest. Well, these are all good guesses. Yeah, they're big, but here's the deal. Pretty much everything on this list is going to dwarf something you could conceivably behold on Earth. And it's gonna be one of those. 1548 is known as the Hateful Star. Stars, as you might already know, are huge. Like our sun is one of the smaller varieties going around. Try to wrap your head around that for a moment. In fact, this star is more than just a star, it's multiple solar phenomena. There's SCP-1548-1, which is a series of sunspots, each 40,000 by 15,000 kilometers in size. About 23 hours after they appear, they converge, becoming one enormous solar prominence, taking the shape of thaumaturgic symbols. Then there are 1548-2 and 3, which are sunspots and symbols that form under different circumstances, but are usually pretty huge too. These occurrences cause a whole lot of insane stuff to happen, from inflicting intense psychological damage on people who behold them, to strengthening materials, to causing weapons affected by the symbol to annihilate stuff around their areas of effect. In fact, a recent event has caused irreversible changes to our solar system. A rapid recurrence of 1548-1 events has led to a dense cloud of ionizing radiation to form around our solar system, totally changing the night sky. The Foundation has started to disseminate information to keep the public calm, but the effects of this change in the sky have started to be noticed. Folks who witness certain things in the night sky have had their minds altered by the malice 1548 seems to emit, and powerful weapons have leveled large areas. There's something in there about a subset of folks known as Ortothans who seem to be waging some kind of war. The O5 Council has been voting on what to do for a while now, but I'm not exactly sure what's gonna happen next, so wish you the best of luck. Coming in at number 4, we've got SCP-3125. Now, if you want to read this one, you've got to know the code to get in. That's right, it's locked behind a keypad, and only those with a secret password are getting in. How do I know the password? Well, I'm special. You're not, but I'll give you a hint anyway. How many flavors in a standard roll of Lifesavers? How many guys at the burger joint that fries their fries in peanut oil? What's 7 minus 2? What's the smallest dollar bill in Canada? A number that rhymes with alive. Use that as you will. I've got plausible deniability if you guys break into the number pad without being allowed to be there. Enter at your own risk. This SCP is quite a mind boink, described as an extremely large, highly aggressive, metastasized meme complex. It started outside our reality and now it's right up in it. I always knew the rising popularity of memes would be the death of us all. It's adapted for survival in much harsher conditions than we can provide, and therefore humans don't really have any sort of defense against 3125. When someone's affected by it, they become incapable of entertaining weaker ideas. Their whole being is then devoted to the propagation of 3125. So this thing can spread fast through the ideas of our weaker minds. And just like propaganda, you're not immune to it. Nope, not even you. No, you're not special. As of right now, it's not entirely present in our reality. If it ever managed to manifest completely, the knowledge of it would spread throughout the world very quickly, likely ending anybody's ability to do anything about it in less than 12 hours. Even now, folks who learn about it end up dead very quickly. The worst part is, most folks who are infected, and therefore are infectious, don't really know it, or they can't conceive of knowing it. Once 3125 makes its way into someone's mind, they forget about it and they don't even notice it. It uses some sort of brain-altering thing to make sure that nobody's aware of it. The way the Foundation describes it is like the stuff mosquitoes use to prevent you from noticing that they're sucking your blood. But instead of your blood, they're like taking over your brain, and it's not itchy, it's just gonna kill you. Right now, there's no real way to fight it. A scientist suggested creating an irreality amplifier, but that would require the folks building it to understand what they were building, and then they would have to know about the meme, and then they'd get infected by it. So let's just hope that the Foundation keeps it in check indefinitely, because if this gigantic mass of memetic information makes its way into our reality, we're we're toast. Coming in at number 3, we've got SCP-1682. Sunworms! Hell yeah, I feel like that's good enough of a description. I don't need to say anything else, just sunworms. Okay, I guess I should explain the whole thing. See, these are large, segmented, worm-like entities that exist in the sun. The good folks over at the Foundation have estimated that the one that we've designated 1682 is over 28,000 kilometers long. It appears to dive and loop for long periods of time, often roaming the surface of the photosphere for 3 to 4 months before diving down and disappearing for 4 to 8 months. The people investigating it believed it to be a permanent fixture at that point, but one day it up and fired its way across the galaxy. It emerged from the photosphere at a speed of 1,045.5 kilometers per second and was last sighted passing Pluto. Now, get this. Some folks are calling it a solar tapeworm. That's right, it lives in the bowels of the sun until it's sapped enough energy and then heads off on its merry way. It's an image I didn't need. Coming in at number 2, we've got SCP-2859. This one literally mirrors an entire quadrant of the solar system, so if that's not big, I don't know what to tell you. Try not to feel too dwarfed in its shadow, you know, we're all tiny specks of insignificant nothing if you really think about it. So isn't that a little bit comforting? No? Not to you? Okay, well, on with the explanation anyway. It will manifest in enclosed, unused space, eventually breaching the object encapsulating it. Expeditions inside have shown that celestial objects do indeed exist within it in the precise locations that they would be otherwise. It also tends to pull anything that makes contact with its threshold in. Otherwise, it doesn't really affect the area around it, it just kind of is there. It's weird and potentially micro-radiation inducing, but not terrible in of itself. But there is a giant species of giant serpentine predators around 80,000 kilometers in length that do seem to follow this anomaly wherever it goes. And anything that it pulls in, they will consume. So that's not good. Instances of 2859 have been spotted dangerously close to Earth too, so you better keep an eye out. And finally at number 1 we've got SCP-3200. Get this, we've made some claims about enormous stuff in this video, but this SCP is literally light years in diameter. 300 million light years to be precise. That is a big anomaly. It's expanding by about 1 million light years per year too. This void could potentially collapse the universe. That's how huge it is. If it were 2009, it would be a great source for run-ups to Yo Mama jokes. However, because we've moved past that as a society, I'll avoid stooping that low. Suffice it to say, this is one gigantic SCP. The exact properties of this thing are currently unknown too. It was discovered by civilian scientists, and the folks who investigated it most closely ran into some issues. The Peregrine expedition took some experimental tech and ran with it, hoping to find something useful within the SCP-3200 void. Taking advantage of temporal sinks, the crew was able to travel into the heart of the anomaly in a relatively short period of time. They arrived in the void and saw nothing but blackness. No stars, no galaxies, true void action. Eventually, a box showed up, surprising the crew. Inside was a CD containing a video of the captain talking to camera. He claimed they'd been trying to slow the anomaly's growth to little success, which disturbed the crew. Over time, reality began to act different, and even more different than they expected going in. They also managed to amass quite the collection of footage of the captain speaking about the anomaly. None of these elaborated on what the anomaly was actually doing though. Eventually, tragically, they got to the source of the matter. After witnessing thousands of different iterations of himself investigate the void over a period of what could be thousands of years, it became clear to the captain that space-time was torn and had been rending itself apart. The things they've seen are echoes of different timelines, produced, consumed, and repurposed by the Abyss. There's no way to fix it, although each iteration of the crew does their best. It's growing larger, consuming more, and yet there is nothing we can do about it. In the last words of Captain Kuznetsov, we've seen into the abyss, and by God, it hates us.